Chapter 441. Real sister? Real older sister? I want them all. The massive devil city, towering there, as if it was the end of the sky. This devil city, though called a city, is in fact a natural marvel crafted by the spirits, with huge crimson stone pillars and rock formations like mushroom clouds, making one feel exceptionally diminutive. Even Xining and Feng Linger, though veterans of the martial world, had never seen such a sight. Such a ghostly place, if not to avenge the extermination of one's family, they probably wouldn't visit in their lifetime. For these past few days, the desert had already given them a hard time. For instance, due to the scarcity of drinking water, their lips were somewhat cracked, and their skin had been tanned a bit. Yet, upon beholding this scene, they couldn't help but marvel at the wonder of the landscape. The saying, "It's easier to watch the mountain than to walk over it," applied to Devil City just the same. The trio had seen it from afar in the afternoon, and after advancing for a whole hour at an increased pace thanks to their movement technique, they still hadn't arrived. At this moment, Xining suddenly stopped and said, "Wait." Then she bent down to the ground, pressing her ear against the earth, listening attentively. Duan Yun and Feng Linger looked ahead to see nothing but the vast spread of yellow sand. No signs of anomaly to be found. "There's something in the sand," Xining said. No sooner had her words fallen than the sand dune in front of them indeed started to stir. Part of the dune's yellow sand began surging upward, as if something wanted to crawl out of it. Seeing Shun Ying's serious expression, Feng Linger couldn't help but draw her sword unconsciously. Even if a ghoul were to burrow out from the sand, she was determined to nail it alive. With a snap, the surface of the sand dune split open, and an ugly head emerged. Almost at the same instant, Feng Linger's sword was already in action. The ugly head was pierced by the sword in a flash, its blood turning the yellow sand red, and its body was dragged out by Feng Linger's sword. What surfaced was a true abomination, an appalling monster that looked like a gecko but was more than 10 times larger. The desert lizard struggled for a moment on the tip of the sword, then died. Feng Linger shook off the corpse from her sword, grumbled in frustration. "Was this the movement you heard from the scalding ground? Are you trying to turn yourself into a grilled stone slab?" Xining had yet to stand up, and replied, "It's coming." No sooner had she spoken than the entire desert suddenly came alive. The movement startled Feng Linger. At this point, even Duan Yun had drawn his blade. The commotion in the sandy landscape was incomparable to that of before. The sand surged incessantly, like spouting fountains, giving the entire desert a boiling illusion. Duan Yun turned around to find that the dunes behind them were boiling just the same. If all beneath were lizards, how many would there be? Would Indian rejoice madly? Swish, swish, swish. Suddenly, the sound of cutting through the air was incessant. From beneath the yellow sand, trails of black shadows shot out like arrows. Duan Yun snagged a pitch-black poisonous snake between his fingers. This poisonous snake had a green crest on its head, looking as if it wore a green hat, feral and fierce, wriggling its body aiming to bite at Duan Yun's hand. A flick of Duan Yun's fingers, and the brain of the green-hatted snake burst apart. But by this time, thousands upon thousands of snakes were slithering frenetically across the desert sands. To be honest, the three had never seen so many snakes before. These snakes slithered around with enough numbers to blot out the sun, reminding Duan Yun of a flock of flying fish he had seen in a documentary from a previous century. The sight of the fish jumping out of the ocean was akin to a drifting downpour. Now before them was a similar rain. A rain comprised of pitch-black snakes. These green-crested black snakes were many, moved quickly, and seemed especially malignant. Some launched themselves at the trio to bite. Some, even when cleaved into two, still writhed and aimed to bite, and if they missed, they would forcefully spray their green venom. They seemed quite petty-hearted, as if determined to bite off a piece of flesh from a person even in death. Duan Yun was someone who particularly despised small-mindedness, in humans and snakes alike. He couldn't help but draw the Yuxiao, ready to unleash the endless electric sword, and put an end to this whole wretched and petty bunch of snakes. At this juncture, Shening intervened. You can't just kill indiscriminately. Feng Linger immediately understood, and while keeping the plunging snakes at bay with her sword, she said, We're not far from Yellow Jade Island. Too much electricity will reveal us. Indeed, even though Duan Yun hadn't made his move yet, they could already envision a sky where snake rain turned into a thunderstorm, and black snakes became grilled snake meat. It was too great a spectacle. Old Demon Duan's moves were the kind that aimed to wipe out a whole species. But the black snakes were quite a nuisance, ceaselessly charging at the trio. Their vision was filled with nothing but snake shadows, their ears ringed with the whipping sounds of the snakes. Come to me, Shening called out. As she spoke, she suddenly embraced them both from the left and right, holding Duan Yun and Feng Linger tightly. Before Duan Yun could even quip about her audacity to left and right embrace him and his lady, his vision suddenly went white. Shening had activated the 9 Death Silkworm armor, enshrouding them all together. The 9 silkworm silk wound around the trio, layer upon layer, keeping the snakes at bay. Wrapped together by the silks, Duan Yun, Feng Linger, and Shening did not know whether it was due to their tacit understanding or all possessing lower temperament. But the words sharing the same blanket popped into all of their minds. At this moment, wrapped up in the silk, weren't they covered under the same blanket? This is giving old Demon Duan an advantage, the two women thought at the same time. Soon after, the two ladies looked at Duan Yun, and he returned the gaze. It couldn't be denied that in the translucent, crystal-clear 9 Death Silkworm silk that seemed like a dreamy filter, the already beautiful Feng Linger and Shun Ying appeared even more radiant. Of course, Duan Yun was no less generous in this respect. Once they realized Duan Yun was staring at them, both women snapped back to reality and in unison said, Don't even think about it. Chapter 442. He's a freak for even thinking it. Duan Yun couldn't help but retort upon hearing Shadow's remark. What makes you say I'm having dirty thoughts? You just looked at my chest. I have no chest and yet you look. The two Shadow Ying stated righteously. Duan Yun was shocked, thinking it's so hot here you're barely wearing anything, and I, being as broad-minded as my vision, it's pretty normal for my eyes to catch both your head and chest in one glance. Thus, he decided to go all in and said, Keep talking, and you'll see if I don't look again. Extraordinary wisdom. I command you to invent your own X-ray cultivation technique. As he spoke, he stared at the two as if his gaze could penetrate everything. Freak! Seeing this, Feng Linger hurriedly covered her chest, her face flushing red. Then, unable to help herself, she added, My mom said you can't look until we're married. At this point, even Shadow Ying felt she had gone too far. Shening was too overwhelmed to respond because she was currently in the midst of creating silk armor in a left and right embrace stance, with no free hands, as Duan Yun's gaze, full of extraordinary wisdom, looked at her, leaving nowhere to hide. Her chest at this moment was fake, flat, and she genuinely worried that the truth would be revealed. After all, this guy's extraordinary wisdom was shockingly profound, even if it sounded like a joke. At this time, she gritted her teeth and said, Have you had enough? The more you look, the less likely my parents will agree. They're very conservative. Duan Yun was stunned, feeling that indeed Shadow Ying would not disappoint when it came to being Shadow, and followed suit. With my 1-in-a-million talent for cultivation, my exceedingly rare extraordinary wisdom, and on top of that my boundless reputation, your parents won't mind this little thing. You! Suddenly, Shun Ying's eyes flickered, and she blushed intensely. So, what you mean is, you want to marry me? Duan Yun looked at her seriously and said, Actually, I quite enjoy spending time with you. He was telling the truth. He really did like being with Shening. That deep-seated fondness had been there since the first time he had pulled her out of the coffin and had never faded. Shun Ying's face turned even redder. You're so shameless. Her words were meant to be insulting, but her voice was soft as the silkworm silk. For a moment, both parties looked at each other, entwined in the tightly woven 9 Death Silkworm silk, shutting out all the noise around them. All of a sudden, a chill came over them. Feng Linger suddenly popped her head out, her beautiful face turning green. "Have you forgotten I'm still here? I'm the legitimate wife." Concubine Shening ignored her, producing more silkworm silk to create a partition for her. Feng Linger quickly realized what was happening and tried to tear through the silk, but her hands were caught and she couldn't break free. At this moment, Shining opened her red lips slightly and said to Duan Yun, "When my parents got engaged, they didn't exchange any tokens. They only did one thing." Curious, Duan Yun asked, "What did they do?" "My dad kissed my mom's face." "Duan Yun, do you dare?" Shining asked, her bright eyes wide open. Feng Linger, in shock, exclaimed, "Shining, are you serious?" As she struggled even more frantically, Duan Yun leaned in a little closer, feeling Shen Ying's breath, and said earnestly, "What wouldn't this young hero dare to do?" With that, he kissed Shen Ying's face. In that instant, all he could smell was the sweet scent of Shen Ying's face. Feng Linger nearly cried out of anger. She had thought Shining might steal the show, but never expected it to happen right here, in front of her. So, she struggled and furiously said, "I hope you're his biological sister." Shining chuckled lightly and said, "He was just kissing his sister right now." "Oh, by age, you're almost old enough to be his sister." Feng Linger was so angry her chest swelled up a notch, exclaiming, "Old demon Ing, you're shameless, you ambushed me." Then, she turned to Duan Yun, fuming and accused, "Old demon Duan, you have no shame, you freak, kissing your own sister." Duan Yun looked at her and said, "Don't scold me, you're next." As soon as these words came out, both Feng Linger and Shen Ying were stunned. Then, both women reacted and cursed, "Shameless! Cad! Cad!" Outside, a bunch of green-hatted black snakes that were previously frenziedly biting the silkworm silk, wanting to kill the three people. Midway, after seeing the trio flirting and arguing with each other, they grew even more agitated and more eager for their demise. But by this point, they were unable to bite through and, exhausted, the swarm of snakes retreated. Thus, a group of green-hatted snakes spat out a string of venom, which looked like they had spat a puddle of saliva on the ground, and scuttled away with a sizzling sound. As the downpour of black snakes left, the desert returned to calm. Shen Ying released the 9 death silkworm silk. The three freed, they breathed in the dry air. They looked at each other with complex expressions. A triangle is solid, but the relationships within it are not necessarily so. Seeing both women glaring at him fiercely, Duan Yun said unabashedly, "What are you looking at me for? One wife, one concubine. I, the great lord, will kiss whoever I want." Feng Linger suddenly laughed heartily. "Right? It's all fake. It's all fake over here. My human skin mask. He kissed my human skin mask. In reality, he was kissing me." With that, she walked forward with teary eyes. Shining stood there and asked, "Is she unable to cope with the shock? Has she gone mad?" Duan Yun raised an eyebrow. "Could it be? Look at her. Acting like a dog," said Shining. Duan Yun turned serious and said, "I was just saying I'd kiss her too. You had to stop me, and now look what's happened." Shining was shocked. "This is my fault? Who else?" Duan Yun said righteously. Chapter 443. Go die. Apart from previously laughing and spouting that nonsense, Feng Linger returned to normal. Duan Yun also felt she was normal. After all, among his many patients, she was the most normal one, so much so that he had previously misdiagnosed her and gave her more than 10 chills for nothing. At this time, the three of them arrived near Devil City. The setting sun was blood red, and the wind blowing from inside seemed like countless evil spirits whispering, sending shivers down one's spine. At this point, the temperature also began to drop. The desert had extremely large temperature differences between day and night, especially noticeable in the region of Devil City. They were just walking on the yellow sand, feeling like they were being roasted. Yet in this moment standing under these stone pillars, it felt as if they had entered winter. Although the sun had not yet set, looking from here, many places within Devil City were already pitch black, as if enveloped by the night, impenetrable. No wonder very few people could enter Yellow Jade Island. Just this devil city alone, without someone to guide, would be enough to stop 1,000 troops. Luckily they knew about the secret path mentioned by Fangao. This secret path led directly to Yellow Jade Island. They could save more strength, and might even catch Jade Guanyin by surprise with a rear attack. Now that Duan Yun was filled with the energy of Spring Thunder, he believed his condition was much better, at least far better than when he went to Mingyu Palace, and he was confident he could return with Jade Guanyin in tow. Return to the west, that is. Following the map provided by Fangao, they continued to approach the Guanyin Monastery. By the time they arrived, the towering rocks of Devil City had already been populated with carvings of Buddhas, lotuses, and predominantly, Guanyins. All sizes of Guanyin. If someone uninformed stumbled upon this place, they might think it was a Buddhist holy land with devout followers of Guanyin inside. Seeing these Guanyin statues, Duan Yun couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. Having so many Guanyin statues on Jade Guanyin's territory made her seem like a disciple of Guanyin. But what's the reality? It's hard to imagine that a witch who deceived countless people, practicing deception to such an extent, would compare herself to Guanyin. Don't your damn conscience hurt? At this time, they had arrived at the Guanyin monastery mentioned by Fangao. There was a populous Euphratica tree at the entrance of the monastery. Honestly, after trudging through the endless yellow sands, suddenly seeing a tree would evoke a sense of freshness and familiarity. This populous Euphratica tree seemed to have died. But there's a saying in the desert. A populous Euphratica lives for 1,000 years yet does not die, dies yet does not fall, falls yet does not rot. Though it's an exaggeration, it represents the magic of the desert. Situations that wouldn't occur elsewhere would occur here. After traveling in the desert for so many days, the three of them, including Duan Yun, had grown a little more in awe of the desert. Though they were martial arts experts, capable of fighting many single-handedly, the harsh environment still posed troubles for them. Before entering the monastery, the three took out their water bladders and rested a little. Afterward, if they wanted to eat well and drink well, they would have to serve themselves on Yellow Jade Island. This Guanyin monastery seemed to have already been abandoned. One side of the gate had collapsed amidst the wind and sand, revealing only a small portion outside. The three stepped through the gate and could faintly see the fallen and crumbling statues. After passing through the courtyard, a long corridor appeared before the vision of the three. At first glance of this corridor, all three felt a tingling sensation. Because on both sides of the corridor, there were countless Guanyin statues up to the hundreds. These Guanyin statues were relatively well preserved, seated in rows on both sides of the wall, in the caves carved into the cliff. Upon entering, one might have the illusion of countless Guanyins watching you. Jade Guanyin must really like Guanyin to have so many Guanyin statues placed here. The corridor was very long, more than a mile at least, and it wouldn't be an overstatement to call it a spectacle. Indeed, even the great temples in Yun State and Yu State would hardly showcase such a scene. However, the monastery had long been in ruins. Some Guanyin statues were decapitated or missing limbs, their features blurred, and accompanied by the moaning winds, like the wail of ghosts, adding a sinister and eerie atmosphere. Abandoned temples and monasteries always give off the feeling that evil spirits dwell within them. Even more so here, right on the edge of Devil City. By this time, the corridor had come to an end, and in front of them lay a row of monastery chambers that had collapsed mostly. The chambers were located under the cliff carved with a massive Guanyin statue. And there was the well mentioned by Fangao. On the ground, some broken ladles and basins were scattered, indicating that people really once lived here. The trio looked at the well and saw that it was pitch black inside. Bottomless. Throwing a stone down, a landing sound echoed from within. Clearly, as Fangao said, the well had dried up. The passage was inside. They just had to be cautious, as there might be deadly things lurking. Duan Yun gave Feng Linger and Xin Ying a glance, then jumped down first. Feng Linger followed closely, and Xin Ying was last. What the three did not see was that when they approached the ancient well, several of the Guanyin statues on the wall had moved. Only after they jumped into the well did these Guanyin statues step out of the caves, looking at each other. They looked exactly the same as the surrounding Guanyin statues, yet they could move. At this moment, they even started smiling, revealing their white teeth, which, in the dim environment, appeared especially horrifying. Chapter 444. Very well, Jade Guanyin, you have angered me. Only killing. Guanyin Monastery's well bottom, a pitch-dark void. But Duan Yun and his companions quickly discovered the secret passage. This secret entrance was situated midway in the well, found by Xin Ying's probing. Initially, this secret passage was gloomy, and Feng Linger was somewhat fearful of such places, staying close behind Duan Yun. If it weren't for her need to maintain the poise of the red heroine, she would have wished to ride on Duan Yun's back. Indeed, they were now within the eerie, man-eating tunnel described by Fan Gao. Fan Gao's brother, Bai Suo, had died here without a trace or sound. Feng Linger's abilities naturally far surpassed theirs, yet her instinctual fear was hardly less intense. However, seeing Duan Yun's figure ahead, she again felt a sense of security. After all, even if there were evil spirits here, this was a person more formidable than any ghost. Perhaps any caught ghost would be forced by him to refine into begging, "I want to become a hero." For a moment, thinking of herself as a member of the heroic community, Feng Linger gradually mustered her courage, straightened her back, and puffed out her chest. Due to the darkness ahead, Duan Yun snapped his fingers, and a heroic fire lotus bloomed at his fingertip, illuminating the way forward. Seeing the heroic fire lotus bring light, Duan Yun felt good. What's this if not martial arts changing life? Indeed, having arrived in this deceitful and murderous world, after all, there are some benefits not present in his previous life, such as having cultivated breaking body sword energy, thereby enjoying an environment free from mosquitoes even in summer, or now having cultivated heroic fire lotus, not only for illumination but also for roasting meat and warming wine, or even frying eggs in the palm of his hand. Duan Yun had envisioned, if he wanted to take on a part-time job during a vacation in the future, working as a chef wouldn't be bad. At least he has now acquired the essential skills of a culinary genius, frying an onion-topped sunny-side-up egg in his palm. As the path is lit up, it's apparent that this cavern has not been deliberately polished, given the uneven and disorderly cave walls all around. At this moment, a vague human figure appeared in the distance, like someone sitting there. Duan Yun paused, and Feng Linger's sword was already unsheathed. With a flick of Duan Yun's finger, the heroic fire lotus drifted over. Actually, for Duan Yun to control heroic fire lotus to this extent is a testament to his extraordinary wisdom. It is known that heroic fire lotus is formed by the friction and crossing of true qi, requiring an extremely high mastery of force and trajectory. And during these days on the road, Duan Yun never ceased training both his hands. Now, both his hands have evolved anew, one might say, more so than any previous old wives of his hands. As the heroic fire lotus floated past, Duan Yun continued to walk forward. He could see clearly. It was not a person but a human corpse. The corpse had clearly been there for some time. In this dry environment, all flesh had gone, leaving nothing but a darkened white skeleton. Duan Yun couldn't help but suspect whether this could be Bai Suo's. After all, Fan Gao had said that Bai Suo disappeared right in this tunnel. And when he described it, Bai Suo vanished abruptly, and when he came back to search, he found nothing. Duan Yun speculated that he had been terribly frightened at the time, and combined with the darkness, he had overlooked this spot. However, it was unclear how this corpse had died. Up until this point, the trio's journey through the tunnel had been uneventful. After all, this was the same route by which Fan Gao and his companions had entered years ago, even reaching Yellow Jade Island. But seeing this corpse had heightened their alertness. An unknown risk lurked here. Although it would not be easy for this risk to claim their lives, making too much noise would definitely be detrimental to them. Entering through the secret passage, they intended a stealth attack, planning to ambush the rear gardens of Jade Guanyin. Duan Yun ignited another heroic fire lotus and continued inward. This time, he was more alert, not only watching ahead but also occasionally glancing at the ceiling. Traveling through a cave like this makes it easy to lose a sense of time. They just kept walking, feeling as if this tunnel was mostly the same everywhere. After a long time, they even felt as though the passage had no end, or as if they were trapped in a looping illusion. If this passageway truly led through Devil City and directly to Yellow Jade Island, then how vast must the overhead Devil City be? At that moment, Duan-Yun pinched, and the heroic fire lotus went out, because a faint glow had suddenly appeared ahead. Is this the exit? All three were struck by the same confusion. The light ahead had indeed become much brighter, but its color was an off-yellow, not resembling daylight. The trio quickened their pace and advanced. Then, a dreamy and surreal scene unfolded before their eyes. They saw fish swimming in the water. The channel glowed a yellowish hue primarily because it was composed of a type of yellow stone. This yellow stone was quite translucent, looking like crystal or glass. Even though uneven, it allowed a view of the scenery outside. Yellow jade, Feng Linger remarked. Before coming here, they had already learned that Yellow Jade Island was thus named because it rests atop a jade mine. It must be said, this kind of jade stone is truly peculiar, transforming this tunnel into a spectacle akin to an oceanarium. They had encountered many novel landscapes along the way. Yet at this moment, they were still overwhelmed by this dreamlike scene. Duan-Yun had never expected to see such a sight in a world of martial heroes. Above them, the yellow jade separated them from the water, allowing them to watch the freely swimming fish and the leisurely swaying water grasses amidst the ripples. Chapter 445. It must be twilight outside. The setting sun, water, fish, aquatic plants, and the transparent yellow jade combine to create a stunningly magnificent scroll. This scene is truly beautiful, like something out of a fairyland. The reflections of Feng Linger and Shining on the yellow jade caused them to pause and look at their reflections numerous times as if looking in a mirror. They always felt that their reflections in the yellow jade were more beautiful than they were. In such a scene, everyone seemed to have been filtered through a haziness, appearing incredibly warm and inviting. Ahead, the dimming light got darker. It wasn't because it was getting dark outside, but rather because the yellow jade here was getting thicker with more black impurities inside. Duan-Yun and his party continued forward, but at that moment, Shining suddenly looked up to the ceiling, startled. She saw a humanoid shape in the yellow jade above her. At first glance, it appeared like an impurity within the jade, but with Shun Ying's sharp eyes, she quickly discerned it wasn't the case. The figure had distinct arms and legs, and even facial features were visible. Upon closer inspection, it was a Guanyin statue. It was nearly identical to the Guanyin statue they had seen earlier in the Guanyin monastery. Feng Linger also noticed this and couldn't help but whisper, "Who embedded a Guanyin statue into the jade?" She said this because it was the only explanation she could think of. Jade Guanyin was a weirdo, a lunatic who seemed to adore Guanyin statues a lot, so it was plausible that he'd take great effort to encase a Guanyin statue into the stone. Couldn't be that the Guanyin statue had grown out of the jade, could it? Common sense told her it was impossible, but as she thought it, an eerie feeling couldn't help but creep over her. She had an unsettling feeling about the Guanyin statue within the jade. After walking some distance, Feng Linger glanced back at the Guanyin statue in the jade, feeling the illusion that it was watching her. No, not just watching them. When they disappeared into the tunnel, the Guanyin statue even opened its mouth, revealing pearly white teeth and a vivid gum line, as if giving off a mysterious smile. By then, the tunnel started to ascend, and the exit was in close sight. With a thud, a curtain of green vines was swept aside, revealing Duan-Yun's figure. He emerged first, followed by Feng Linger and finally Shining. Basking in daylight once more, the threesome couldn't help but widen their eyes. Before them lay Bai Lake. Bai Lake was vast, extending as far as the eye could see, giving the impression of the water towns of Jiangnan. It was hard to imagine that such an expanse of water could exist in a desert so full of sand. This was definitely not an oasis in the ordinary sense. Crescent Bay, which they had visited before departure, had abundant water and could be regarded as the largest oasis in that area. Yet when compared to the water before them, it seemed negligible. At this moment, twilight was fading, and the setting sun left only a scarlet brilliance in the sky. The sunset, blood red, cast a crimson hue over the lake. Their location seemed like a small island within the lake, no bigger than two houses combined. Yet there were many such small islands. Even as the sun was about to set, one could still see the yellow in the water. Those yellow tracks were like submerged dragons extending far into the distance. These were likely the veins of the yellow jade mine. Looking from there, at the center of the lake where the mine veins extended, one could make out the silhouette of pavilions and terraces. The architecture of the desert was distinct from other places, mainly made from yellow earth and long in shape, and now, from this vantage point, one might get the illusion of being in the water towns of Qingzhou, especially with a small black canopied boat floating on the lake's surface. However, the boat seemed to have been abandoned, drifting forlornly on the water with a roof full of holes. Duan Yun looked back and could still see the towering Devil City stone pillars behind them, standing tall like giants between heaven and earth. It was hard to fathom that such different sceneries could coexist. Seeing no one around, the three of them decided to take advantage of the dimming light to blend into the island. They did not walk on water but all submerged and headed toward Yellow Jade Island. As the sun set, the entire water area became very dim. To avoid detection, their dive was deep. Submerged in the water, they felt as if the deeper areas led to another world, the realm of the netherworld. At this moment, the yellow jade mine veins in the water looked more and more like enormous yellow dragons. Seeing such a sight underwater, one can't help but feel a sense of fear, a fear of massive beings. Although Duan Yun and his two companions didn't make much noise, they swam at a considerable pace. Feng Linger and Shunning swam gracefully in the water, with their dresses flowing beautifully, really resembling mermaids in legend. But they still couldn't outpace Duan Yun, because Duan Yun's breathing was unique. After mastering the breaking body sword energy, Duan Yun had unwittingly learned a special breathing technique, a method that involved breathing through the skin. This breathing technique could not replace his normal breathing but served as an aid, such as when it was not possible to take a breath, using the skin to take in air. This was precisely why, despite his powers and breath not being as profound or enduring as Ming Xing's, who had cultivated the Mingyu skills, Duan Yun was able to combat until the very end. This auxiliary method of skin breathing made his breath more lasting, more cyclical. And in water, this breathing style was even more effective, not only facilitating better air exchange but also propelling the body through the water with the flow of breath, making him seem very agile. Duan Yun had already decided that he would take the time to practice in the water later, to see if he could make the skin breathing technique become instinctive, completely replacing nasal breathing so that he could then sleep in the water. Chapter 446. Alas, young hero's schedule was packed. His extraordinary wisdom had yet no chance to be fully applied before he arrived here. Ahead, the rumored Yellow Jade Island was now within sight. By now, night had completely fallen. With neither stars nor moon today, the sky draped in a layer of black silk. Accompanied by a slight sound of water, Duan Yun and his two companions stood on this island. This island, the most mysterious in the martial arts world. Duan Yun, although he had experienced exterminating entire households across several states, this was his first time venturing so far from home. They had crossed 3 states, circled around snow mountains, passed through marshes, entered deserts, and traversed the vast Devil City to arrive here. The journey had been somewhat arduous, especially the last few days in the desert, feeling like meat on a roasting board. However, at this moment, Duan Yun was not only not tired, but his eyes lit up with excitement, because the people he was here to save and destroy were right here. In the night, the vast Yellow Jade Island had no lights, all was dead silent. At this moment, as they looked at the outlines of the buildings that resembled those of Jiangnan water towns, they did not feel the tenderness of the water towns, but rather a chilling eeriness. The sky was too dark, without a single light, without a hint of human liveliness, making this place seem like a dead silence. The three shook off the water on their bodies a bit, then edged into the shadows and walked inward. In the night, Yellow Jade Island looked like a tomb, but soon they heard sounds. The sound of something scraping on the ground. Ahead was a street corner, and the sound was coming from there. Duan Yun and the others lightened their footsteps and moved closer. On the ground, something was wriggling like a worm. Shining squinted to see clearer and discovered it was actually a person. Yes, the wriggling was indeed a person. The scraping sound they heard earlier was from this person wriggling on the ground. Honestly, witnessing this scene made them involuntarily think of the Murong brothers who swam around like maggots. However, unlike the Murong brothers, this person used no tricks, simply rubbing his body against the ground. Soon, several similar sounds arose. Ahead, several people were wriggling on the ground, making similar sounds. The road ahead seemed covered with these worms. Feng Linger whispered without sound, "Living dead. Jade Guanin's living dead. Alive yet devoid of much consciousness. Like walking corpses, at the mercy of Jade Guanin's orders." Duan Yun couldn't help asking, "Then what are they doing?" "Sweeping the floor," Feng Linger responded. She had heard bits and pieces about Jade Guanin from her mother and knew how twisted and evil she was. It was said that when she softened, even the most hard-hearted people would melt and bow down at her skirt. But when she hardened, she was comparable to the devil. Feng Linger pointed at the ground. Duan Yun and Shen Ying then noticed that the street pavement was very clean, even spotlessly so. These people indeed were continuously wiping the ground, back and forth tirelessly. At this time, the closest living dead to them was wriggling over. Duan Yun, quick as lightning, pressed several acupuncture points on his body and dragged him over for observation and study. By rights, with several major acupoints sealed, this person should barely be able to move. But not so, he still instinctively maintained the wriggling posture, only much slower. In Duan Yun's eyes, this entire person no longer seemed human, but a real worm. Trying to seal the acupoints of a worm to immobilize it is extremely difficult. Duan Yun turned him over, and the next moment, the three of them couldn't help but frown. The man's back looked truly horrifying, even disgusting. Layers of scabs and calluses piled up, resembling fish scales scraped by a knife. This was clearly caused by endlessly wiping the floor, bleeding, scabbing, and then forming calluses. This man, still ceaselessly wriggling even though disheveled with no trace of blood on his face and extremely emaciated, had once been a handsome man admired by many in the martial world, perhaps even quite famous. Now, after Jade Guanin tired of him, he could only be discarded here to mop the floor, continuously mopping, like a walking corpse mopping. Seeing a living being, as handsome as himself, transformed into such a ghostly state, Duan Yun felt a chill run down his spine, while simultaneously filled with rage. Shit. If this mad woman, Jade Guanin, is not eliminated, then handsome men like me in the martial world will never have peace. Shit. For a moment, the newly appointed Blood Shadow Mad Blade seemed to sense his intentions, quivering within the wrapped cloth. Only killing. Chapter 447. The old witch finally meets her match. Who will come out on top? Duan Yun and his two companions quickly determined that these people wriggling on the ground did not possess much consciousness. They merely wriggled, treating themselves as cloths for wiping the floor. They even showed no reaction when Duan Yun and his companions walked past them. Later on, in addition to those wiping the floor, there were also those endlessly sweeping it. In the night, Yellow Jade Island was still devoid of lights. The island was not small, with pavilions and buildings meticulously constructed, and due to these living dead, it looked spotlessly clean. Even the true water towns could not be so refined and clean. Yet within such a picturesque landscape lived a woman like a devil. There seemed to be many people here, but you couldn't feel the presence of any living beings, only a sense of gloom and terror, as if this place were not of this world. Seeing the fish-like scars and calluses on these people's bodies, watching their incessant worm-like movements, thinking of their once proud demeanors, for these once heavenly prides, this place might as well be hell. Such a life is simply more tragic than death. Duan Yun, being inherently kind-hearted, thought that if these people could not be saved, he would help them pass away to end their suffering here. Ahead, a bridge appeared. The stone bridge was exquisitely ancient, with stone railings carved with mythical beasts resembling green lions. At this moment, Xining, who had been to Great Ming Lake, felt as if she had returned to the famous Rain Lotus Bridge by the lake. This stone bridge seemed as if it was transplanted from the one by Great Ming Lake. Could it be that Jade Guanyin once lived by the Great Ming Lake and liked it so much that she created this water town on this desert island? At this time, the number of people on the bridge suddenly increased. Besides those wiping the floor, there were others licking the railings, standing on their heads, some constantly reading a book, and several men holding umbrellas, staring into the distance. Here, they seemingly tried to create a lively living scene. Unfortunately, the people here were already mere shells, like a silent pantomime. Quite horrifying. As darkness deepened, the three of them walked on this mysterious island, feeling as if they had strayed into a horror movie set. And there was a sense of insecurity. These people seemed to be the living dead without any consciousness, but there might be conscious spies among them. If so, their movements could very likely be known to Jade Guanyin. This was an unavoidable situation, so the trio could only try to move towards more concealed and dark areas. All of a sudden, Xining at the front slowed her pace. Her eyes, always sharp, spotted the flicker of firelight behind the willow trees ahead. The appearance of firelight on Yellow Jade Island, which had been lacking it, does it signify people living inside? Living people. Before they set off, the three of them already knew that the island was not only inhabited by Jade Guanyin. The information from the scrolls told them that there were some disciples under Jade Guanyin. Otherwise, even if she was adept at controlling the living dead, she could not easily control such a large island, not to mention controlling forces that could influence a country. Ahead, willow trees lined the sides of the street, with black-tiled and white-walled houses on both sides. And the firelight was in a house behind the shade of the willows. The three of them moved even more stealthily towards that direction. During this period, they had already employed light body skills. Their feet as if cushioned with flesh pads, landing silently. Even a nimble cat could make more noise than they did. They quickly discovered that the houses along the entire street were lit. Each house was closed tight, but through the paper windows, the flickering of candlelight could be seen. Yet they could not see any human figures for the time being. If all the houses on this street were lit without people, then who lit these lamps? Duan Yun quietly pierced through a window paper with breaking body sword energy and looked inside. He quickly made out the beauty, only seeing a Guanyin statue in front of the burning candle. After that, he proceeded to the second, the third. On this street, every house enshrined a Guanyin statue. And those burning lights, besides the oil lamps, were the candles offered to the Guanyin statues. Suddenly, Xining pointed towards the side of the street. There, a candle had just been lit. If the fire had just been lit, it meant there was someone. The three quickly surrounded that place. Duan Yun and Feng Linger reached the front of the house, and with a swift motion, clung under the eaves like geckos, while Xining crouched at the doorway. If there was someone inside, the moment she emerged, she would be immediately surrounded and beaten by the righteous trio Yuzhu. Duan Yun, clinging under the eaves, could see through a gap in the window that there indeed was a person inside. It was a very young-looking girl. Not only was her figure light, but she also sported twin ponytails and walked with a bounce, giving a youthful, frolicsome vibe. Although her face was unclear, Duan Yun could imagine she was very young. The twin ponytail girl, wearing a peach blossom-colored dress, lit candles for the Guanyin statue inside. Afterward, she clapped her hands and walked out. With a creak, the moment the door opened, 6 hands transformed into 6 shadows, striking towards her. The twin ponytail girl had an extremely quick reaction, retreating back a step at least. But just 1 step and 8 of her acupoints were sealed, and she fell backward. Duan Yun quickly caught her, intimidatingly said, "Don't be afraid. We are heroes. If you behave, we won't kill you." This girl had a peach blossom-like face, looking incredibly young and beautiful. Now suddenly falling to the ground, overwhelmed with tears, she was in a pitiable state. Chapter 448. Young hero Duan is not a soft-hearted person. Although he verbally claims he does not kill, if he confirmed that this girl was evil, he would definitely kill her afterwards. Heroes kill based on evidence. Even if it breaches the principle of a hero's word being as weighty as 9 sacred tripods and tarnishes his lofty character, he would still do it. Acting for heaven, the act itself holds greater importance. The ponytailed girl was silenced at the dumb acupoint and couldn't speak. She could only blink her eyes. It seemed as though she was willing to obey. This should be the first genuine living person they had found on Yellow Jade Island since their arrival. So they eagerly wanted to make progress in unraveling the situation. Thus, he pointed his finger and released her dumb acupoint, asking, "Who are you?" The ponytailed girl answered anxiously, I am Qi, the 7th disciple of Jade Guanyin. Do you know if Jade Guanyin has captured 2 women here recently? Duan Yun asked. Qi shook her head. Master usually only captures handsome men to play with, not women. What about you? Duan Yun continued. All of us sisters were adopted by her, Qi responded. What else does she do other than capturing handsome men for her base desires? Duan Yun continued inquiring. When she tires of them, she lets us sisters have our way with them, and then turns them into living dead, Qi answered. Hearing this reply, Duan Yun and his companions raised their eyebrows slightly. These captured men really suffered, not only at the hands of the master but also the disciples. Thinking of this, Duan Yun was moved to kill. This girl looked pitiable, but she was also an accomplice. Qi suddenly realized and said, I didn't do it. Why should we believe you? Shening countered. Master said I am young, not suited for such acts, and asked me to watch and familiarize first, and later, when I master the cultivation technique, then I can participate. Really? I really only watched every time. Duan Yun looked at her, not seeming to lie. He originally planned to use the Biming divine skill to chillingly probe for the truth, but this cultivation technique had significant side effects, likely causing the other party to scream, I want to be a hero. Yes, even if the opponent's dumb acupoint was sealed or their vocal cords destroyed, they would still make noise. After all, he had tested it on dead bodies before. Even a corpse with its neck severed, just a head remaining, would shout, and wicked creatures like centipedes also confirmed this. He even suspected that his heroic spirit automatically generates a I want to be a hero sound wave, so that even if the other has no throat or mouth and has breathed their last, they could still shout it. There's no end to the martial paths. This is the only relatively scientific explanation he could think of. Alas, no choice, he speaks scientifically. He demands that extraordinary wisdom also speak scientifically, but heroic spirit does not adhere to science. If this girl suddenly shouts, I want to be a hero, it would be like loudly announcing to Jade Guanyin that they have arrived with drums and gongs. That would not be them stealthily attacking Jade Guanyin from behind, but Jade Guanyin ambushing them instead. Thus, Duan Yun, with a dark-hearted uncle-like demeanor, stated, Lead us to where your master detains people. Any trickery and you will surely die. The ponytailed girl quickly shook her head. Don't kill me. I watched so much, never got to play. Dying would be too pitiful. Goodness, even at this time she still thought of debauchery. Yet, from this girl's mouth, these words strangely gave off an innocent impression. It can only be said that the environment shapes its inhabitants. Living on Jade Guanyin's Yellow Jade Island, where debauchery leads, this seemingly ignorant girl has been poisoned and does not see debauchery as a sin. Once the rotten matters were settled, he needed to capture Qi and rigorously test her true nature. If true as she claims, if she did no evil deeds and only watched, then whether to sever her from her past or to let her reform completely would be decided then. After all, merely watching isn't considered too great a sin. Young hero Duan has always been quite tolerant. Master's captives are detained at the immortal platform. I will lead you there soon, but wait until I light the candles. Otherwise Master will be suspicious, Qi sincerely said. Okay. Duan Yun clapped his hands, temporarily releasing 2 of her major acupoints, allowing her just enough ability to move. Then Qi went to light candles in the other rooms. Her actions clearly proved Duan Yun's conjecture. This street was uninhabited, only used to pay homage to Guanyin. Every room housed a Guanyin statue. After lighting the candle in the last room, Qi anxiously glanced at Duan Yun and the others, then nodded. Duan Yun's form drifted, sticking close behind her like a ghost, and in a ghost-like voice told Qi, "Lead the way, fail and your death will be miserable." His demeanor indeed carried an aura of a vengeful ghost claiming a life. If the situation were not urgent, Feng Linger and Shen Ying might even suspect him of taking advantage of the other. Because they too were beauties, yet they acknowledged Qi's beauty as well. Such beauty at her young age. She would be unstoppable once grown. Her main feature was her pair of peach blossom eyes, her entire presence innocent yet with a hint of allure, and her chest was not small either. Logically speaking, she wasn't fully mature yet, but her bust was already ample. Feng Linger seriously doubted hers were larger, while Xining felt she could rival her in the future. However, what was most important now was the rescue mission. The even in death we must compare rivalry between women was temporarily set aside. At night, the lake's surface was shrouded in a thin layer of water vapor. The entire yellow jade island was enveloped in mist, making it appear almost like a celestial realm. Indeed, if not for the living dead and if there were more real people here, this would truly be a beautiful place. Chapter 449. Qi led them into a willow forest. The mist lingered over the willow forest, and the branches swayed like ghostly claws reaching out to claim lives. Ahead, they came upon a tall willow tree. Its branches hung low, like a splendid canopy. At this point, Qi had slowed her pace. Beneath the willow, two figures stood. Both were men clad in golden armor. The two men were tall and imposing, their golden armor glistening in the distance like divine generals. Qi walked over to them. Duan Yun hid behind another willow, his sword finger ready. If that girl dared any tricks, he'd send her to the heavens with a finger strike. But Qi simply waved at the golden-armored guards, and they turned away, disappearing into the night. Now Qi was waving them over. Duan Yun stepped out from behind the tree, still holding his sword finger, followed by Feng Linger and Xining. The little miss hadn't played any tricks. "Where did they go?" Feng Linger asked softly. "I sent them to pee," Qi said. "To pee?" "I used a hand signal from my master, and they went off to pee. Without that signal, they wouldn't go even if you blew them up there," Qi said earnestly. Although it sounded like a joke, the truth was rather sinister. Because Qi had told them that one of the golden-armored men had already exploded once before. The living dead of Yellow Jade Island were all under her master's control. And beyond the willow tree, there was a house. The house looked ordinary, but once inside, a passageway leading downwards was immediately apparent. The passageway led deep underground and was quite wide. Supposedly with no guards, Qi didn't slow down. Xining couldn't help but wonder, this place for imprisoning people, it's only guarded by those two? If that was truly the case, the security here was much looser than she had expected. Qi, seeming somewhat puzzled, said, "Those two are very powerful. Before coming to the island, one was known as Flying Thunder God Axe." Hearing the words Flying Thunder God Axe, both Feng Linger and Shen Ying fell silent. As veterans of the martial world, they knew the weight of those words. Years ago, Hu Chong, the senior brother of the Huashan sword sect, led his junior disciples through martial world, where their sect was influential and Hu Chong was considered a top contender among the younger generation. However, at an inn, an axe wielder gave his beloved junior sister too many glances and who couldn't resist snapping, "What are you looking at?" igniting a confrontation. In martial world, axes were considered inferior to swords and sabers, not to mention compared to the Huashan sword sect. Normally, when faced with the numerous and powerful Huashan sect, one would submit. Yet this axe wielder wouldn't budge. /N/OV.E/L.com. A clash ensued, and Hu Chong was confident of his victory. But that day the axeman hacked his way from the inn's backyard to the next street, Shiyuan, slaughtering Hu Chong and most of the other 3 generations of disciples. It was said that the man's axe throwing was likened to thunder's flight, killing with each throw. Later, several elders from the Huashan sect sought to capture him but failed, either injured or in vain, and the matter was never mentioned again. Considering the sect leader of the Huashan sword sect was famous for holding grudges, the fact that such a blood feud was dropped spoke volumes of the fearsomeness of the axe-wielder. This axe-wielder was none other than Flying Thunder God Axe Jin Shankai. Who would have thought such a man, notorious throughout the martial world and even the Huashan sect couldn't touch, would end up here as a golden armored guard, deprived even of the freedom to urinate. And their condition seemed little better than the living dead. For a moment, the two women felt an even greater dread for Jade Guanyin. Duan Yun, oblivious to this history, showed little reaction. Before long, they arrived at the immortal platform. This underground space was indeed constructed as a prison, iron bars partitioning off cell after cell. Most cells were empty, but some held people who appeared unconscious. Duan Yun and the others also noticed that each cell housed a Guanyin statue, in front of which candles burned. At that moment, an eerie scene startled Duan Yun and his companions. Several inmates confined in the cells were eating the candles. They were munching on the candles meant for offering to Guanyin, savoring them as if they were delicious. Shining and Feng Linger felt the hairs on their necks stand up. After all, they had heard that only those possessed by ghosts would eat candles. Could it be that each cell contained nothing but ghosts? Where then were Ning Qing and Ziyu? At this moment, Qi suddenly turned, smiling sweetly at them. Duan Yun, keeping his sword finger ready, asked, "What are you smiling about? Old demon Duan, you smell so good. Haven't you noticed this place actually smells quite fragrant?" Qi stood there, smiling sweetly. Shining suddenly felt alarmed and said, "This fragrance is poisonous." As she spoke, she began to sway from side to side. Using all her strength, she spun out 9 death silkworm silk, wrapping both herself and Feng Linger beside her. This silk armor was tough to break with blade or sword and could hold out for some time. But by the time she thought to save Duan Yun, it was too late. Her consciousness was already blurring, and he was too far away for her to reach. Duan Yun's cultivation was obviously deeper, but as he looked at Qi, sweating on his forehead, he said, "Who are you?" "My lord, I have languished day and night longing for you, and now I can finally savor your essence," Qi giggled. At that moment, she had lost all appearance of innocence and youthfulness, transformed into someone unspeakably beautiful. Jade Guanyin. After Duan Yun uttered those 3 words, he fell down stiffly. "Take them to my room. I want to torment their beloved right before these 2 women," Jade Guanyin ordered. As her words fell, the Guanyin statues in those cells stood up. They continued to chew the candles as they approached Duan Yun and the others. Their skin was sallow as rock layers, each face resembling Guanyin. They chewed the candles like malevolent spirits, creating a chilling and horrifying sight. All along, Duan Yun and the 2 women had not realized that Qi was Jade Guanyin, nor had they suspected the Guanyin statues to be alive. The aura emanating from these Guanyins was faint but similar to the scent of the candles. What Jade Guanyin also hadn't noticed was that at this moment, Duan Yun's skin and pores were subtly writhing like breath. Chapter 450. Men are enthralled at first smell. Mad woman, take my sword. The Guanyin statues, indistinguishable from human or ghost, one carrying Duan Yun, another hauling a cocoon enveloping Shining and Feng Linger, set forth outward. They passed through Willow Forest and returned to the long street. 3 Guanyins walked the street. Even in motion, they still looked like sculptures, their eyes utterly dull, skin extremely sallow. But their silhouettes were elegant, accompanied by the misty haze, truly like Guanyin descending to the mortal world. As they walked, a succession of door-opening sounds began to echo along the long street. Those Guanyins previously offered to buy Qi chewed candles while walking out. In a flash, at least dozens of Guanyins had gathered on the street. They not only looked identical, as gentle and compassionate as the temple's Guanyin statues, but also shared the same height and pace. Each Guanyin step measured exactly 2 feet, as though calibrated. Almost simultaneously, they started muttering under their breath, resembling the chanting in temples. For a moment, the scene more closely resembled a bizarre ceremonial gathering. Duan Yun was not fully unconscious. He could breathe through his skin, release sword chi through his pores, and so he expelled the poison through them likewise. Thus, the peculiar poison from Jade Guanyin didn't affect him much. For good measure, he had thoroughly purged the poison from his system along the way. Only then did he realize that what they saw earlier were not statues but actual people. The spies of Jade Guanyin. Though Duan Yun didn't understand why they looked so alike or what caused this transformation, he clearly knew that ever since they stepped onto Yellow Jade Island, they were exposed to these Guanyin statues' observation. Therefore, Jade Guanyin had long been aware of their movements and thus had set a trap for them. Who would have thought that the elderly Jade Guanyin, when disguised as a young girl, could be so convincingly youthful, even more so than Shining? It could be said that she was the most deceitful person he had ever encountered. Jade Guanyin proclaimed herself the #1 beauty, perhaps proving the saying that the more beautiful the woman, the more deceitful and dangerous. However, fortunately, he had this last resort. Without entering the tiger's den, one cannot catch its cubs. Now he must continue feigning unconsciousness, delve deep into the den, and await an opportunity to strike back at the mad woman. To avoid detection, Duan Yun seldom glanced around. At this moment, they reached the end of the street, and the sound of water greeted his ears. Dozens of people resembling Guanyins, carrying the trio including Duan Yun, entered the water. The water was clear and shallow, merging with the lake, where carps of blue and red swam by their feet. Duan Yun sneakily glanced once, only to see an island beyond this shallow water. An island within Yellow Jade Island. The island appeared elevated, as if all the yellow jade veins converged here. If the underwater veins seen earlier resembled yellow dragons, then here, 5 yellow dragons converged to form an island. The abode of Jade Guanyin. This must be the residence of Jade Guanyin. The jade veins shaped like yellow dragons stood tall, exuding a majestic aura, while the area around the jade mine bloomed with purple flowers. Even with no moon and the dim sky, these purple blooms glowed as if luminous, paired with the dragon-like yellow jade veins, creating a dreamlike and illusory scene. That pavilion stood at the island's apex, appearing to be just a pavilion. A gust of wind set the wind chimes hanging under the pavilion's eaves into motion, emitting a crisp jingling. Creak, the carved doors of the pavilion swung open. Upon entering, Duan Yun immediately inhaled a faint fragrance, gardenia-like in its subtlety, yet it stirred up longing desires. Could this fragrance induce ardor? Duan Yun suddenly realized, questioning. His mind, brimming with extraordinary wisdom, pondered whether he should instinctively succumb to the aroma while feigning unconsciousness or resist. Will an unconscious person feel arousal induced by a fragrance? As these thoughts crossed his mind, the Guanyin carrying him slowed down until halting altogether. Duan Yun remained with eyes closed, continuing to be unconscious. He felt himself being set down into something soft. He sensed the light changing around him, likely because lamps had been lit. "It's time for you to awaken." Then, a sultry voice resonated, and Duan Yun felt a fragrant breeze envelop him. This breeze carried a refreshing sense as it entered his mouth and nose. This must be the antidote for the entrancing fragrance. Pretending to struggle, Duan Yun opened his eyes. Immediately following were the voices of Fenglinger and Shining. "Jade Guanyin, release us. Have the guts to fight fair. Let's duel. You used Bai Su Qingfeng, we have no strength left." Shining and Fenglinger's utterances were the typical expressions of someone played like a fool. Both claimed to be veterans of the martial world, especially Fenglinger, who touted herself as the one who knew Jade Guanyin best within Yuzhu Villa. Yet they were outwitted so easily. Blame it on Jade Guanyin's skillful deceit. Merged poisons scent with the candle's aroma. At that time, they were shocked seeing someone consuming a candle, which caused their delayed reaction. Presently, Fenglinger was still bound by Xinying's silk armor, with no strength to muster, so she suspected the use of Baisu Qingfeng. Jade Guanyin was adept with poisons. Her own mother had fallen victim to her unusual poison. She knew Baisu Qingfeng was faint in scent but potent in effect. Even a master of the Tongyu realm could hardly gather their true qi, leaving them languid and weak. Chapter 451. Jade Guanyin looked at her through the silk armor and responded, "What Baisu Qingfeng? That stuff can never truly satisfy anyone. I stopped using it many years ago. This one's different." Clearly, this fragrant breeze could awaken them, but it also sapped their strength. Feng Linger stubbornly said, "If it's not Baisu Qingfeng, what is it?" "It's called a man enraptured 3,000 times with one whiff." At this moment, they could see the scene inside this loft. Duan Yun was lying on an extravagant, round bed that was so big it could be mistaken for a living room or even a small courtyard. Duan Yun was on the bed, while Feng Linger and Shining were thrown to the side of it. The loft was adorned with numerous red ropes, and around the edge of the bed were circles of burning red candles. Hearing the name of this poison, Feng Linger and Shining felt uneasy. Shining questioned, "A man enraptured 3,000 times with one whiff? But what about women?" "Women? Even amongst women, there's a big difference. Some women can be equally enraptured as men in their ecstasy, while others can only watch from the side. Which one do you think you are?" Saying this, Jade Guanyin's body gently drifted up to one of the red ropes above. The red rope coiled around her ankle, and she ended up hanging upside down. She was already wearing a thin and light dress. Now inverted, parts that should and shouldn't be seen by men were exposed. Her figure was already extraordinary. Her skin was smooth like satin, delicate and flawless, without a single scar. Even though Feng Linger thought of herself as young and well-maintained, she couldn't help but feel inferior at that moment. It had to be said that Jade Guanyin had the secret to retaining her youth, living in the desert for so long and still maintaining such perfect skin. Could even be said to be perfect. At this moment, Shining and Feng Linger couldn't help but curse out loud, because they realized that Jade Guanyin wasn't wearing any undergarments or underclothes. Even though they were women, their faces flushed and their hearts raced at the sight. And just then, a soul-stirring voice rose. The inverted Jade Guanyin took up a red candle, aiming it at her pristine and perfect skin. As the scalding wax dripped down, landing on her skin, she let out sounds of both pain and pleasure. The scene was too impactful, especially when combined with her innocent yet charming face, her inverted posture, and the sounds coming from her mouth, which exuded a charm different from the ordinary. Too provocative. Both Shining and Feng Linger could hardly bear it. What about Duan Yun, who was still affected by a man enraptured 3,000 times with one whiff? Duan Yun was silent the whole time, looking like he was enduring great difficulty. Shining and Feng Linger both knew that his situation wasn't good. They knew how he was. If the situation weren't terribly bad, his cursing would be fiercer than that of the women. But now he remained quiet. Duan Yun, young hero Duan, Murong Fu, Duan Lang, old demon Duan, nameless young hero. Do you know, every time I hear each of your names and think of your handsome face, I can hardly contain myself. With each name of Duan Yun she mentioned, her breathing became more hurried. The wax fell onto her snow-white skin, a luscious red, unspeakably enchanting. Thinking of you, I just want you to spend a lifetime with me. As she spoke, the red rope around her foot slid down, and she drew closer and closer to Duan Yun. Ing, seeing this, cried out in panic, "What are you going to do?" Feng Linger struggled with all her might, trying every way to muster her true qi, but to no avail. Jade Guanyin smiled seductively, licked her red lips, and said to the two women, "What am I going to do? Just to show you how he's supposed to be used."
No.
"Don't!" Shining and Feng Linger cried out, their eyes filled with fury. At this moment, Jade Guanyin had already fallen in front of Duan Yun, her body only inches away from his. She looked at Duan Yun, the contrast between the bright wax on her skin and her snow-white flesh striking. Young hero Duan, you're so good at enduring. Sadly, it seems that you can no longer hold back. By now, she had set her gaze on Duan Yun's groin. Let me help you. With that, she reached out her delicate hand to remove Duan Yun's trousers.
No.
Don't. Seeing this scene, Feng Linger and Xining struggled and tears streamed down their faces. There was nothing more humiliating than this. Nothing. Jade Guanyin, truly a devil. As if to give them a clearer view, in the next instant, Duan Yun's body had been carried by Jade Guanyin into the air, and her 5 fingers had reached out, as if riding the wind. Duan Yun struggled for a moment, looking listless. You really like this haughty look of yours, but soon you'll have nothing left but to enjoy, Jade Guanyin mockingly said. Duan Yun seemed to give up struggling and said, Fine, then I shall enjoy. Hearing these words, the faces of Feng Linger and Shun Ying both turned green. Can't you maintain some male integrity? Even pretending to be tough would be better. That way it wouldn't be so distressing for them. Very good. At this time, Jade Guanyin already couldn't wait to press herself closer. Screw your mother's wall. Netherworld-breaking body sword pillar. Suddenly, Duan Yun's lower body thrust up, and a black sword energy column burst through his pants, aiming straight for Jade Guanyin's heart. At such a close distance, with such a sudden and tricky attack, even Jade Guanyin couldn't avoid in time. A poochy sound was heard as the black sword energy column went through Jade Guanyin's belly, and blood sprayed out. Such a scene completely stunned Shin Ying and Feng Linger, who had just been cursing Duan Yun's lack of male virtues. With a loud bang, Jade Guanyin slapped her palm and also wiggled her toes, and the red rope already disconnected from Duan Yun. Thus, in midair, Duan Yun and Jade Guanyin clashed with a palm each, and his body fell, while Jade Guanyin floated upwards. The sword energy column was clearly aimed at Jade Guanyin's heart, but Jade Guanyin, being Jade Guanyin, instinctively felt the crisis and utilized her movement technique to let the red rope whisk her downwards. This move avoided her heart being pierced while hanging upside down, and instead, her belly took its place. This long premeditated bladder thrust from Duan Yun was fast and fierce. Jade Guanyin might have avoided a fatal penetration, but the injury she sustained was definitely not light. Her intestines must have been cut off. After landing, Duan Yun had no intention of giving his opponent a chance to breathe. Stepping on the bedboard shattered while his whole body shot out like an arrow, ready for another onslaught. Jade Guanyin's body was still hanging upside down on the rope, facing the trauma to her abdomen and Duan Yun's aggressive pressure. Her eyes became very calm in an instant. With one hand covering the abdominal wound, she stretched both legs, forming an inverted splits pose. View the correct content and at this moment, 2 red ropes had appeared on her feet. Duan Yun clenched his sword pillar and charged forward. Feng Linger and Xining just caught up with the rhythm, thinking the situation was very favorable. The next moment, a series of dense sounds of sword clashes erupted. Clang, clang, clang. Sparks flew like rain. The clashing sounds made people's teeth sour, and the air throughout the room was trembling, humming. The charging Duan Yun broke his momentum and landed on a pillar, with black-breaking body sword energy swirling in his hand, engaged in a fierce battle with Jade Guanyin. Jade Guanyin, hovering on the red rope, suddenly spun around, becoming a blur of fiery red shadow. As she spun, her 2 red ropes whistled along, like high-speed rotating blood-colored blades. In a snap, they had exchanged hundreds of moves. Duan Yun could emit sword chi from his entire body, while Jade Guanyin's spinning technique was also unending, equally good for offense and defense, with a staggering momentum. To Duan Yun's senses, it was like a fan that was about to slice people up. Pop, 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 pop. The wooden pillar under his feet was shaking violently. Duan Yun thought that emitting sword chi from all over his body made him fast, but Jade Guanyin was not outdone. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. No, as 2 more red ropes added to Jade Guanyin's legs, her offensive was even more intense than Duan Yun's. It was hard to imagine that an almost difficult gymnastic move could have such tremendous power. Stop your tricks, always using such tricks. Cree. Suddenly, the cry of a crane rang out, as Duan Yun's sword chi blasted the spinning red ropes. His figure soared like a white crane with its wings spread, shooting up to the sky. Immortal Crane Divine Needle. Chapter 452. Extraordinary Wisdom. Open together. Thunderfire Twin Swords. This instant, Duan Yun's leg hair, chest hair, and hand hair flew out. If Murong were here, he would have wished to strip Murong of all his hair, including but not limited to his hair and eyebrows. Because Jade Guanyin is truly a formidable opponent. Even under the circumstances of his sneak attack being successful, his opponent could still match him equally in battle, and even momentarily suppress him relying on home ground advantage and his unarmed condition. How could a hero born between heaven and earth be suppressed by a woman under her skirt? The immortal crane divine needle is swift and fine, like strands of flowing light, some directly piercing through Jade Guanyin's spinning red rope. With two snapping sounds, it is apparent that the divine needle hit the opponent, but Duan Yun couldn't relax just yet. Almost at the same time, Jade Guanyin's spinning red rope suddenly flicked upwards then swiftly pressed down, forming a bizarre arc, striking towards his face. This bizarre arc was also a bizarre blade edge. As the red ropes on Jade Guanyin's feet spun, they became sharper than actual blades, capable of cutting a person in half. Little Yu. Black silk, Little Yu Dharma image appeared, and a black great sword suddenly emerged from Duan Yun's chest, colliding with the red rope. With a bang, like an exploding barrel of gunpowder, the air around them flowed like water. The pillar beneath Duan Yun completely crumbled, and he began to fall, while Jade Guanyin, wrapped by the red ropes, spun upwards. Midway, she had already gathered her true chi and let out a delicate moan. Forcing out the hairs, Duan Yun shot into her. These hairs were itchy and painful, truly bizarre. But her true chi was not to be underestimated. Only goes to show that this handsome old demon Duan truly caught her eye, having so many tricks up his sleeve. Roaming the martial world for so many years, it's been a long time since she's faced an opponent that could make her feel pain. In the eyes of Xining and Feng Linger, what scared them most was that although Jade Guanyin was clearly hurting, her expression became even more maniacally excited, as if she enjoyed this kind of pain. What kind of constitution is this? With a bang, Duan Yun landed, shattering the ground. This ground was covered with many bulges of yellow jade, looking much like tree roots. His expression also turned solemn. This Jade Guanyin truly has formidable strength, not comparable to anyone from Mingyu Palace like Elder Yang Li. His immortal crane divine needle didn't cause much damage to her, unlike Yang Li, who likes to scratch herself to death. After Jade Guanyin forced Duan Yun's hair out, her body couldn't help but feel a bit hollow. But she didn't stop. Her right hand's fingers overlapped, transforming into a blur, healing her abdominal wound. Jade Guanyin also possesses a similar ability to Duan Yun to heal with bare hands. However, at that moment, the true chi inside her body suddenly became chaotic. Her legs locked tightly in a splits position, and she screamed, "I want to be a hero." Such a change, even she was startled. This was all due to Duan Yun incorporating heroic spirit and wind-flowing force into his breaking body sword energy. At that time, his focus was on a deadly hit, focusing on killing. The heroic spirit and force were not abundant. View the correct content at. Yet Jade Guanyin's constitution, not like ordinary people, even under injured conditions, easily suppressed the heroic spirit and force. But Duan Yun's heroic spirit and force were not easily dissolved. They would seize any gap available. While Jade Guanyin was drawing on her true chi to heal, these forces suddenly burst out, causing a chain reaction. However, Jade Guanyin also lived up to being one of the most mysterious and terrifying women in the world, as she immediately suppressed these two forces. At this moment, she even provocatively laughed. "Good husband. So you wanted your wife to leak. Your wife will satisfy you now." Duan Yun seized the opportunity to catch his breath, not willing to give the mad woman a chance to breathe, and in a flash he struck like an arrow, attacking again. Death Aura Thunder Sword. Sizzling sounds. In black silk attire fluttering, releasing the netherworld death energy formed into a sword, and in an instant, in sync with her heart, released thunder and lightning. The lightning swiftly danced on the black sword, its force astounding. Yes, now he and Little Yu had already reached a heart-to-heart level. Thus they could match hearts as they wished, like butterflies flitting among flowers, playing various tricks as they wished. Seeing that he was within striking range, Duan Yun's spirit tensed, again forming a divine connection with Little Yu. Death Energy Thunder Styles Swords. With a whoosh sound, the black great sword in his hand split into two, held in both hands, followed by a fierce crisscross. For a moment, the Death Aura Thunder Sword was like a pair of scissors, aiming to cut Jade Guanyin in half. Come on! With Jade Guanyin's allure-filled voice ringing out, brilliant sparks erupted again. Jade Guanyin was not afraid of Duan Yun's giant scissors. The red ropes on her feet transformed into sharp arcs again, colliding with Duan Yun's sword chi. Even more terrifying was that this time she voluntarily urinated, the flying urine mixed with the red ropes attacking, some even transforming into flying arrows striking at Duan Yun. Such a scene, even Duan Yun, who mastered flirtatious finger strength, found it perverted. With a snap, his left hand holding the Death Aura Thunder Sword hit Jade Guanyin and sent her flying, while his right hand holding the Death Aura Thunder Sword had to defensively block. Because Jade Guanyin's urine arrows were clearly not a spontaneous exhibition, but were full of force, already penetrating through his unleashed breaking body sword energy. As the explosion sounded, the two parties separated again. The next moment, Jade Guanyin's coquettish laugh suddenly spread across the island. I, your wife, am really excited. Her figure moved around the ropes inside the building like a ghost. Qing, come out now. Chapter 453. Duan Yun clenched his fists, little Qing's twin ponytails fluttering as her cheongsam, where blue met white, rippled, creating circles of ripples. Thousands. Heroic fire lotus blooms. The fierce lines of fire zoomed through the attic in an instant, making the air blisteringly hot. Immediately after, one after another, the incredibly hot heroic fire lotus burst into bloom in succession. Duan Yun had already unleashed his first trump card. Jade Guanyin's figure darted between the lines of fire and the fire lotus, ghostly and elusive. Unfortunately, when the heroic fire lotus accelerated its bloom, her weaving had already lost its effect. Jade Guanyin had already been scorched by several heroic fire lotus, but in the next instant, she suddenly disappeared. With a wave of his hand, Duan Yun parted the heroic fire, drifting it around. Thus, Duan Yun suddenly saw the place where Jade Guanyin had vanished. The place where Jade Guanyin disappeared turned out to be a Guanyin statue. There were quite a few Guanyin statues in this room to begin with, and when you added the Guanyin that carried them in before, there were even more of them. For a moment, Duan Yun could barely distinguish whether these Guanyin statues were alive or not. Had Jade Guanyin hidden inside one of these Guanyin statues? Without any hesitation, Duan Yun threw a punch down. With a boom, the Guanyin statue instantly exploded, blood splashing everywhere. This Guanyin statue was also a living person, just not where Jade Guanyin was. Ah! Suddenly, a seductive voice sounded. View the correct content at. A Guanyin statue next to him suddenly sprang up, pouncing towards Duan Yun. She clearly looked like a Guanyin almost identical to the ones who had carried Duan Yun before, but her pose was now just like Jade Guanyin's. An inverted split, even without being wrapped by a red rope, still spun towards Duan Yun like a whirling blade edge. Merge! Duan Yun's fists came together, and the surrounding heroic fire lotus suddenly converged towards him. The heroic fire lotus collided and completely burst apart, causing the temperature around to abruptly rise, turning the scorching air into ripple-like undulations. In an instant, the windows and doors of the attic were ignited by the ripples, and even the nearby lake water steamed up into white mist, in which a few carp were shocked to death and then cooked, releasing a charred fragrance. A terrifying explosion formed in front of Duan Yun, connecting into a column of fire. Even behind Duan Yun, where the heroic fire lotus were sparsest, Feng Linger and Shining, despite being shielded by the 9 death silkworm silk, still felt like they were about to become delicious barbecue. Inside the dreadful pillar of fire, the body of the Guanyin cracked and ignited, but she kept spinning frantically. This rotation deflected most of the firepower, but what heroic fire lotus could be considered ordinary flames? She was burnt to splits in an instant. Yes, split open. But in the next moment, Jade Guanyin drilled out from the split body, continuing to sweep with the red rope in tow. She had entered the bodies of these Guanyin-esque people, manipulating them and avoiding most of the damage. But it was faintly visible that she was still injured. Her body hairs burnt off without a trace, and her waist and back severely scorched, leaving fresh red marks. However, Jade Guanyin seemed even more excited. Yes, she was naturally fond of pain, the more excitement, as could be known from the previous wax-dripping performance. Duan Yun hadn't expected that his heroic fire lotus would act as an aphrodisiac, setting this mad woman loose. With a snap, Jade Guanyin's right toe suddenly clenched a fist, and in an instant, a segment of her toenail transformed into a streak of light that flew over. Duan Yun swung his fire fist, smashing it. With a thump, the ground cracked, and Duan Yun staggered back 2 steps. The strength of Jade Guanyin's toenail was terrifyingly powerful. Buddha's voice. At this moment, taking advantage of the rebound force, Jade Guanyin flew up, her body once again entwined with a red rope. The red rope was extremely thin, seemingly mixed with metal, and not even the heroic fire lotus could burn through it. As her voice fell, all the Guanyin in the attic moved. They all opened their mouths, starting to emit a chant-like sound. At this time, the air around seemed to have changed, becoming oppressive and heavy, as if tangible. Duan Yun suddenly bent forward and flashed, leaving behind an afterimage. And almost at the same time, the spot where he had just been was covered by flowing ripples. With a bang, the ripples crashed into the ground, causing an explosion. Sound wave attack? Nah! 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 The Guanyin-like figures continued to vocalize, bringing forth a series of fast and fierce sonic attacks, while the chanting was also extremely deafening, as if drums were pounding next to one's ears. Ordinary people, upon hearing this sound, would be shaken until blood flowed from all 7 apertures. Duan Yun relied on his flirtatious toe strength to keep moving and dodging these Buddha's voice attacks. Even with his profound strength, he was still disturbed by the sound, shaking his eardrums and causing agitation. Damn the heretical ways, always fond of these messy tricks. Seeing this, Feng Linger said, "We must help him." Shining frowned and said, "True Qi, True Qi." Without Duan Yun's ability to breathe through their skin, they stood no chance against the overpowering poison. Even a slight recovery meant little, as they were still unable to do anything. At that moment, something changed in Feng Linger. Her aura suddenly soared as true qi began to overflow from within her. Shen-Ying turned to see Feng Linger's hair floating in the air. Her eyes gleamed with a green light. Passion's red face. A sword's glow cleaves the day before. The female hero's deepest love falls into star fury. The male hero's tears of blood drop in sorrow and rage. His beloved female hero can only watch helplessly. No. No. In that instant, Feng Linger, as if possessed by the storytelling Ziyu, imagined the scene of Jade Guanyin cruelly toying with Duan Yun right before their eyes. Her heart ached with sour grief and mingled bitterness. This intense suffering unexpectedly stirred the true qi in her body, transforming it into strands of sword qi. Seeing this, Shen-Ying was reminded of the Murong siblings practicing their martial arts with faces full of spite and agony underneath the bed. Indeed, you are worthy siblings. Ah! No. Thinking of Duan Yun's tragic circumstances, Feng Linger's potential was suddenly awakened. Swish, swish, swish. Plum blossom-like sword qi burst forth in an instant, pushing aside Shen-Ying's 9-death silkworm silk, spreading out like a flowing cape behind her. Beloved's tears of blood, burying the enemy. In the next moment, Feng Linger became a blurred shadow dashing forward. In her hand, there was no sword, yet plum blossom-like red-faced sword qi enveloped her. In the blink of an eye, She, like a flowing plum blossom, passed right through the body of a chanting guanine. That guanine figure split in half immediately, with cut edges smooth as glass. Feng Linger swung her hand again, and the plum blossom sword chi cape whipped around even more vividly. Bang, bang, bang. With Feng Linger's form transforming into a sword, a dozen guanine had been slain. Extraordinary wisdom. Dharma image pair. Open. With Feng Linger's sudden outburst, Duan Yun felt the pressure around him greatly decrease. His arms extended. Almost simultaneously, Qing and Little Yu began executing their moves. In an instant, black silk and white silk intertwined, fist power and sword chi entwined. Duan Yun actually launched fist technique and sword move at the same time. 1,000 heroic fire lotus. Electromagnetic sword field 10,000 times. Damn it. Together. Together. Rotate. ZZZZZZ. The electromagnetic sword field spread out in an instant, while at the same time, the fire lotus infiltrated like a net of fire threads. What appeared before everyone was a vision of thunder and fire. Even the air felt the terror of thunderfire, emitting a deafening blast noise. This is the song of thunder and fire. At this moment, Jade Guanine, who was jubilant from pain and had gained the upper hand with the assault of her Guanine's Buddha's voice, looked grave and even panicked. Buddha's divine bell. As her voice fell, the remaining dozens of Guanine simultaneously opened their mouths. This time, their mouths opened enormously wide, grotesquely exaggerated, even splitting their lips. If you looked closely, you'd see their mouths had formed into the shape of bells. Seeing this, Feng Linger slashed with her sword chi, intent on a swift kill, but at that moment, she heard a roar like the boom of thunder. Ah! Her entire body was blasted away. The Guanine's throats bulged as they cried out in chorus. At this moment, they bled from all orifices, screaming with all their life force. The frightful sound waves converged, forming a fluid stance of a colossal bell, hurtling towards Duan Yun. For a time, the bell, massive as a mountain, bearing down with its terrifying pressure and unparalleled power, seemed intent on crushing Duan Yun to dust. Damn it, that mad woman still had one loud ace up her sleeve. But now, young hero Duan's heroic spirit was at its peak, his fighting spirit bubbling. What fear did he have? Double unleash. Thunder fire heavy sword. An electromagnetic storm of thunder gathered in both his hands, forming two colossal electromagnetic swords. The giant swords, with their terrifying suction, drew in the heroic fire lotus, creating the true flowing thunderfire sword. Kill! Duan Yun swung both arms, wielding dual swords. One sword to slash the bell, one sword to slay the demon. For a moment, thunderfire howled, sword chi cut through, shredding the air, as if even the air itself was being ground to pieces. D. Chapter 454. Mad woman, young hero, I'm coming to kill you. The thunderfire giant sword, carrying terrifying thunderous roars, slashed and stabbed left and right, as if the entire space was about to be split open and pierced through. Even from a distance, Shun Ying's hair was caught in the electric currents, floating up. With a thud, terrifying shockwaves rolled and turned into raging torrents, charging straight into the sky. The thunderfire giant sword collided with the Buddha's divine bell, causing the entire island to shake, as sturdy pavilions leapt upwards, seeming as if they were about to take flight. After being struck, the Buddha's divine bell trembled violently, its sound waves directly vibrating to death the surviving Guanine below. On the surface, blood flowed from their 7 orifices, while internally, their organs and even their brains were shaken into pieces. On the other side, Jade Guanine, hanging upside down, sank lower and called out with a voice almost frantic to the extreme. All beings do not turn back. Guanine hangs upside down. In an instant, she was enveloped by true chi, emitting yellow crystalline formations, as if donning a yellow crystal armor. Explode! Before the thunderfire giant sword could reach her, her seemingly defensive move transformed into an offense, as she initiated an explosion. An utterly complete explosion. This time, not only the yellow crystal armor animated by the true chi on her body exploded, but so did the scant clothing she wore. Boom! At that moment, the Buddha's divine bell, ignited by the thunder fire sword, trembled more violently than ever. In the instant before shattering, it quivered mightily and let out a cry, "I want to be a hero!" Indeed, as a young hero, Duan Yun infused his sword with his sense of justice and supreme heroic spirit, making the bell's thunderous sound seem quite reasonable. As soon as the voice faded, the entire Buddhist bell completely burst apart. The previously vibrated to death Guanyin corpses instantly were blasted into the air, exploding into dust and smoke. Meanwhile, Jade Guanyin and her bursting clothing collided with the thunder fire sword. This burst of clothing also unleashed an intimidating presence, with yellow crystal fragments like spinning mirrors, each one creating spinning vortexes, accompanied by a whistling sound like a woman's gasp. If it's said that Duan Yun's thunder fire giant sword was imbued with his heroic spirit, representing his spirit of justice, then Jade Guanyin had also injected her own provocative energy into this Guanyin hangs upside down, making it seem like thousands of women were gasping together in the pavilion. Yes, this was not only a clash of force, but also of spiritual power. One side exemplified heroism to the utmost, while the other displayed sensuality to the extreme. Ah! Eh! The thunder fire giant sword and the yellow crystal fragments collided, with the gasp-like sounds of the fragments promptly reaching a climax, resembling thousands of women being tortured, emitting sounds of pain or pleasure. Suddenly, the dreadful sounds of explosions pierced ears, and with a loud bang, a massive column of smoke shot into the sky. The roof of the entire pavilion was blown off. The scattering tiles instantly turned from fragments into fluff, disintegrating into ash. The ash then turned into rain, so that the pristine yellow jade island was polluted, resembling a scene from the apocalypse. Thud! Gold fragments were shattered, and the thunder fire giant sword sparkled and dissipated. After this explosive clash, the rebounding force hammered the bodies of the two, separating them from each other. Jade Guanyin, stripped naked, bore not a single hair on her body and was covered in many red and black wounds. Red indicated burns from the heroic fire lotus, whereas black denoted injuries from lightning strikes. She vomited a mouthful of fresh blood with a cry, falling to her knees. Duan Yun crashed into the ruins, his face turning pale, trying to use his sword to prop himself up, only to find it missing from his hand. "I want to be a hero." Humph! Almost simultaneously, Jade Guanyin issued a hero's cry, while Duan Yun let out a severe breath. Both were influenced by each other's spirit, transforming differently. After such an intense collision, both found it difficult to take the initiative in attacking again. While shouting, "I want to be a hero," Jade Guanyin began to recite Buddha's voice, and within the broken pavilion, several Guanyin with missing limbs crawled towards her. As the first Guanyin reached her, it draped over her like clothing, then melted, burning like candle wax, and was absorbed by Jade Guanyin. She was absorbing their life force, healing her own wounds. Meanwhile, Duan Yun gasped as if in ecstasy, while applying fingertip thunder to heal his internal injuries. It must be said, his voice was unbearable for Shining, invigorating a sensation as if being engulfed in flames. At this moment, Shun Ying lay in the ruins, her 9-death silkworm armor dispersed. Yet she was still unable to move. Thus, she imitated Feng Linger, listening to Duan Yun's voice, and imagining him being ridden by Jade Guanyin. Instantly, she felt so agonized, so uncomfortable, as if she had fallen into an ice cave in the dead of winter, unable to climb out. It was truly terrifying. What's more terrifying was that despite such thoughts, she still couldn't muster any strength. Was her imagination even more perverse? But in her pure mind, except for adding more people to the scene, she couldn't think of any more perverse and tragic visions. How much more perverse could it get? With a whoosh, just as Jade Guanyin was eating Guanyin to heal, a shadow suddenly lunged from behind. Feng Linger, seize his chastity. Blood bury your life. Now, engulfed in a state of painful madness, Feng Linger, it must be said, was very immersed in her role, treating her imagination as reality. Thus, driven by suffering, she unleashed formidable power. The plum blossom-like sword Qi, along with her darting form, crashed into Jade Guanyin. Chapter 455. Jade Guanyin still didn't turn around, and didn't even move. It was just that the Guanyin statue that had just melted against her body had turned into a stream of corpse oil, flowing towards her back. Swoosh! Corpse oil burst forth and collided with Feng Linger. Feng Linger's figure paused, and in a blink, she was sent flying out. Jade Guanyin's body moved, twisting like a snake, merging with the last Guanyin statue. This time, she didn't absorb and dissolve the other, but wore it like a piece of clothing, putting the other upon her body. So, all of a sudden, Jade Guanyin had 2 heads, 3 arms, and 4 legs. 2 heads, one with her beautiful twin ponytail appearance, the other in the likeness of Guanyin. Under the night sky, they looked bizarre and terrifying beyond measure. At this point, she had become a monster-like figure crawling towards Duanyun. "Ah, my lord, your consort almost died just now." Jade Guanyin emitted a seductive voice. As soon as the words fell, she seductively cried out again, "I want to be a hero." With this eerie ability, she actually took action before Duanyun did. At that moment, Shening also started to move. She realized that imagining Duanyun in that situation couldn't allow her to break free from the strange poison and unleash her potential like Feng Linger had, because it was a matter of inherent talent. She didn't have that kind of talent, but she possessed another kind. She had just seen Feng Linger engulfed in sword Qi, slaughtering those Guanyin and helping Duanyun, turning into a stream of sword Qi, clashing with Jade Guanyin, while she did nothing, could do nothing. In other words, she was the most useless one there. If that was the case, she would lose to Feng Linger, not as good as the Morong brothers, not as good as Feng Linger, and would completely become the bottom rung of Yuzhu Villa. Heroine Dang turned out to be trash, and considering the journey thus far, she could only be forced to play the role of a concubine. While Feng Linger was the wife, that feeling of humiliation suddenly crawled all over her body. If this continued, she feared she would always be like this, thoroughly defeated by Feng Linger, quite possibly truly becoming trash, relegated to being a concubine, no, even a servant attending to her and Duanyun. No, don't bully a young girl's poverty. In a flash, Shining, naturally competitive, who wouldn't go home unless she was ahead by an ounce while fishing, finally summoned her strength. Her fist clenched tightly, true Qi poured out, even the constraints on her chest broke, lifting up prominently. She no longer had time to worry about these details, because Duanyun was in trouble. At that moment, Jade Guanyin, cooing seductively, "I want to be a hero," charged at Duanyun. "Although I'd love to be ravished by you to the brink of heavenly ecstasy, your consort cannot die. You're too dangerous. I can only play with your corpse." The 2-headed Jade Guanyin pounced. Her right hand congealed into yellow ice crystals, like a pair of translucent gloves, aiming straight for Duanyun's heart. But almost at the same time, Duanyun arched his back, and the breaking body sword energy burst out once more. "Mad woman, eat another sword from me." Yes, at the moment that Jade Guanyin was able to move, he could actually move too. But he was still feigning, aiming to find a better opportunity. Jade Guanyin's right hand closed, and with a snap, seized the breaking body sword energy that was emerging from between Duanyun's legs. She believed she would not be hurt by the same move twice, but suddenly, a phantom silhouette attacked. Shunying's figure turned into a phantom, delivering a violent elbow strike. Jade Guanyin instinctively tried to dodge, but when the elbow struck, the 9-death silkworm silk had already shot out first, snagging her rapidly retreating head. With a thud, her head was solidly hit by the elbow strike. The terrible trembling turned her head into a phantom, her skin rippling like waves, and her body stumbled uncontrollably, her hand that held the breaking body sword energy slipping. With a crack, Jade Guanyin let out a seductive yet agonizing scream. Due to this slip, Duan Yun's breaking body sword energy pierced her buttocks from behind. Duan Yun and Shen Ying coordinated perfectly, both not giving the other a chance to breathe, and so we saw Shen Ying's fist raised again to strike, while Duan Yun continued the motion in his lower back, bringing up the second wave of breaking body sword energy. Jade Guanyin was truly bizarre. Even when faced with the joint attack of Heroine Dang and nameless young hero, she still did not submit passively. That Guanyin head suddenly swerved, blocking Shen Ying's fist. Boom! The moment the Guanyin head was shattered by the fist, she was stabbed again by Duan Yun's breaking body sword energy, her buttocks blossoming from the assault. But when the next wave of breaking body sword energy came, Jade Guanyin's additional legs involuntarily blocked it, blocking the breaking body sword energy and letting out a shrill shriek. Rampant true chi surged out through the wound on her buttocks, blood turning into a horrifying blood arrow. Duan Yun and Shen Ying could only roll away to dodge. By all accounts, this was Jade Guanyin's death struggle. Jade Guanyin took advantage of this rebounding force to lunge forward. The Guanyin statue on her had been completely absorbed, but the injuries this time were too severe to be mended. She had no more Guanyin to use, while Duan Yun and Shen Ying, having dodged the blood arrow, charged over. The two didn't even glance at each other, yet the sound of their fist power sounded simultaneously. In that moment, Duan Yun and Shen Ying's fist power were entwined together like infatuated lovers. Dragon and Phoenix double flying fist. On the side, Feng Linger intended to stay down, thinking she had burnt out to the extreme. But when she saw this scene, her eyes involuntarily turned green, her already greenish brain quickly filling in the plot. Jade Guanyin played him, let Shen Ying play next, and refused to let her play, forcing her to watch. Watch helplessly. No. Boom. Like plum blossoms, sword chi once again enveloped her body. Chapter 456. This time, even the plum blossoms were turning green. At this critical juncture between life and death, Jade Guanyin had already pushed her potential to the limit, and also her composure. Her years of experience had long taught her that only by staying calm could she survive. But at this moment, feeling the fist power clinging to her like a lover from behind, and sensing the rekindled sword chi that had seemingly extinguished, she almost couldn't hold it together. These two women and one man were all mad. Duan Yun managed to escape her toxins, and she barely grasped why, but what was with these two? Pure madness, right? With a bang. The ground where Jade Guanyin stood now bore a deep fist imprint, pierced through with sword chi, appearing unfathomably deep. But Jade Guanyin was not there. She wasn't blown to bits and scattered all around. Instead, she had suddenly disappeared. Such a change caused Duan Yun and the other two to tighten their expressions. After all, they were intent on annihilating Jade Guanyin's entire family, and she was the one they could least afford to let go. The next instant, the sharpest-eyed Shen Ying shouted, "In the Jade!" Duan Yun and Feng Linger hastily looked and indeed discovered Jade Guanyin had burrowed into the yellow jade mine, and was swimming further inside like a fish. How could a person swim inside jade? For a moment, image after image flashed through Duan Yun's clever mind. They had once seen a Guanyin statue in the yellow jade vein, thought it very strange, even eerie, wondering why someone would be silly enough to bury a Guanyin statue inside a jade mine, as if the statue had grown out from the jade itself. It appears, could this jade mine actually be penetrable? Damn it! Thinking of escaping, Duan Yun leaped up, channeling his true chi into his legs, and stomped down. With a crisp snap, the surface of the jade mine shattered, jade fragments splashed like rain, and half of his body also sank into the yellow jade vein. At this moment, Duan Yun realized that the inside of this jade mine was actually soft. Watching Jade Guanyin escape through the jade mine like a swimming fish, he too plunged in with a fierce dive. But the moment he plunged in, Duan Yun realized something was off. It was completely different from what he had imagined. He saw Jade Guanyin swimming in the jade mine like a fish, thinking the inside of this mine was like water. Unfortunately, it wasn't. How to put it, it was like somewhat hard sludge. Sinking into it was hard. Even breathing was difficult at first. Fortunately, his skin's pores quickly adapted, allowing him to breathe and adjust to the environment. Then, Duan Yun began to forcefully swim forward. It must be said, even though he had barely solved the problem of suffocation, swimming in the yellow jade vein was still extremely difficult, much harder than moving through mud. It felt similar to swimming in cement. Even though Duan Yun used all kinds of skills, deploying various movement techniques, he still couldn't move as freely as Jade Guanyin. He quickly realized. Jade Guanyin could swim so smoothly likely because her cultivation technique was probably derived from this kind of yellow jade, or to say, she had always been cultivating with yellow jade. This was also why her body could condense into yellow crystals, and why she could transform the Guanyin body for use. Because they were inherently closely connected, even arguably from the same source. Just like a swimming champion who could win an Olympic gold medal, but couldn't burrow through dirt like an eel. Jade Guanyin was now that eel. Meanwhile, Xining and Feng Linger, who had also dived into the vein, had already crawled out. If young hero Duan could still move slowly with his left and right hands, they were utterly immobilized. They found it extremely difficult to adapt to that environment. Perhaps that's why Jade Guanyin had managed to deceive so many heavenly prides without killing them. It's well known in the martial world how many people hate Jade Guanyin to the bone, and many masters came specifically to confront her, such as Feng Linger's mother, and others even stronger than the purple dragon King Feng Yu's mother. Yet Jade Guanyin remained unharmed, demonstrating how formidable her survival techniques were. No, it wasn't just formidable but rather miraculous. Jade Guanyin swimming in the jade was just so miraculous. But young hero Duan, on his mission to vanquish demons, couldn't possibly give up so easily. Since this yellow jade mine obstructs me, then I shall smash it. Breaking body sword energy roared forth, splitting the jade in front of him. Duan Yun's speed increased, yet he discovered it still wasn't fast enough. Heroic Fire Lotus. Another Fire Lotus ignited within the jade mine. Breaking body sword energy connected with the heroic Fire Lotus, transforming into a scorching fire sword, and surprisingly worked wonders, slicing through the jade mine as though cutting through butter. At this moment, Jade Guanyin had already dived into the water-filled jade vein, slithering like within the body of a yellow dragon. Not seeing any reaction behind her, she couldn't help but lie there gasping for air. This time it was too perilous. She never believed she couldn't deceive Duan Yun. Even if he was an infamous demon, stained with the blood of countless masters, had fallen many, and destroyed many clans. Yes, she recently had taken a liking to bad men, especially handsome bad men. Thinking of the appearance of Demon Duan, she couldn't help but hum lightly, unable to stop the itching, the unbearable itch impossible not to deceive. She first captured Ziyu and Ning Qing, showing enough respect to Demon Duan. She used to deceive princes and did so in the royal palace, never coming here. Because on Yellow Jade Island, she was unbeatable, unreachable by thousands of troops. If she intended to hide or flee, just with her capability to freely navigate the Yellow Jade Mine, even 10 masters of equal prowess couldn't handle her. Here, she was invincible. But this time, old Demon Duan, along with 2 female demons, truly exceeded her expectations. All 3 were insane. First, the men lose their souls at the scent failed consecutively. She was ambushed by these 3, her abdomen penetrated, her head smashed, and her own rear end was punctured severely. This was an unprecedented severe injury, and on top of that, Demon Duan, acclaimed as the most prominent rising demon in the last 2 years, proved to be a tough adversary. He couldn't be taken down even inside the Yellow Jade building. If it weren't for this Yellow Jade mine, she feared she might have been severely injured and on the brink of death. Thank goodness. Jade Guanyin sighed. Her cultivation technique was inherently linked to the Yellow Jade mine. Not only could she freely navigate here, but the Jade mine also accelerated her healing and the recovery of her powers. She just needed to first heal these severe injuries, and as long as she was in the mine, she was... Suddenly, Jade Guanyin's beautiful eyes tightened. She suddenly saw a blaze of fire behind her in the mine. That firelight, like a flat boat, was riding the wind and waves, following the vein towards her. Mad woman! Young hero here to kill you. The moment this voice sounded, Jade Guanyin's heart skipped a beat. Holy crap! I am so screwed. Chapter 457. Jade Guanyin, you're finished. Jade Guanyin felt a surge of fear as she heard Duan Yun's voice behind her. It was as if she were being stalked by a madman, by living Yama. Although she was called Jade Guanyin, no one in the martial arts world dared to challenge her title, yet she was not the actual Guanyin. Thus, with her severe injuries, she was somewhat afraid of this madman. This reckless madman who was after her life. Why must it reach this extent? I just wanted to defile you and turn you into my living dead. I haven't done anything wrong. Why must you push me so hard? Jade Guanyin quickly continued to sneak away in the yellow jade mine, fearing being caught up. Absolutely no one could catch up with her in the yellow jade mine. Absolutely no one. Because she was the master of yellow jade, the owner of this mine, it made no sense for outsiders to catch up with her. But every time she looked back, she saw a fireball approaching like a death charm, which made her heart pound in terror. This is deadly. While burning the heroic fire lotus, Duan Yun pursued Jade Guanyin. Honestly, he was a bit tired by now. His true chi was nearly depleted, and heroic fire lotus, in particular, consumed a lot of true chi. Jade Guanyin believed that in this jade mine, no one could harm her, which was theoretically correct, but she underestimated her injuries and young hero Duan's resolve to execute her. The mad woman, as acting for heaven, Jade Guanyin swam freely in the jade mine, like a fish. However, Duan Yun advanced with much more difficulty. He had to activate heroic fire lotus and breaking body sword energy to break through the mud-like yellow jade mine. But even if Jade Guanyin were a real fish, she was a severely injured one. In such a short time, she had been continuously fighting. Even though the powers from Guanyin could temporarily alleviate her injuries, it was only temporary. She had several severe wounds, one nearly fatal, two perforating her body, and her head was severely battered by the madwoman who used her elbow. Blood flowed in the jade mine, and fatigue overwhelmed her like a tide. At that moment, she could already feel a burning sensation behind her. That madman was really chasing her. Jade Guanyin quickly pushed her palms outwards, forcing out palm force. Instantly, the palm force turned the surrounding yellow jade into spear-shaped spikes, fiercely stabbing towards Duan Yun. With a loud bang, the heroic fire lotus burst forth, sweeping the yellow jade spikes into shattered pieces. In the next moment, Duan Yun brought his hands together, squeezing the true chi and death energy inside him to form a black breaking body sword, thrusting it towards Jade Guanyin. Honestly, he quite enjoyed stabbing this mad woman. This mad woman was sturdy, and stabbing her gave a satisfying squelching sound, utterly enjoyable. At this moment, if Jade Guanyin could hear his thoughts, she would definitely curse out. Mother's not sturdy at all. She's almost being stabbed to death by you, and yet you say she's sturdy. The yellow spikes transformed from yellow jade could not ward off Duan Yun at all. Facing another thrust of his sword chi, Jade Guanyin let out a soulful gasp while her body inverted in the air, her true chi bursting out all around her. Indeed, it was another move similar to exploding clothes. But this time, her entire body was naked without forming much yellow crystals. Yet she still exploded. What burst wasn't just the pitiful yellow crystals but also her skin. Her skin injured by Duan Yun's burns, including her own flawless skin. Jade Guanyin always loved beauty and was extremely narcissistic. Being forced to lose her skin like that was shocking and infuriating to her. But more than that, it was fear. If this time her jade exploding into stars couldn't stop the opponent, then she was indeed in trouble. If old demon Duan coveting her beauty meant that the vulnerable and powerless her had some chance. Her predictions were that this madman would probably kill her first and then defile her extremely beautiful corpse. That would be utterly hopeless. With a loud explosion, two powerful forces collided, instantly cracking the vein of the mine, the softer yellow jade inside flowing like water. Duan Yun and Jade Guanyin both fell out of the mine vein. The view was unexpectedly of a dark green watery area. Falling from the yellow mine vein into the water was a fresh experience. The water was chilly but gave Duan Yun a sense of relief. After all, the jade mine was harder than mud. Jade Guanyin's explosive move truly had a shocking momentum, It directly shattered Duan Yun's painstakingly accumulated breaking bodysword. No, Duan Yun's clothes were also destroyed. So in the water, you could say it was a pair of naked man and woman. No, the woman had even lost half of her skin. However, this was also all that Jade Guanyin could burn away. Taking advantage of Duan Yun momentarily unable to muster true qi, she struggled, wanting to swim back to the jade mine. Just as the fracture of yellow jade vein was within sight, Jade Guanyin exerted all her strength and lunged forward. But the next moment, the most terrifying scene unfolded. Her ankle was grabbed by the madman. A moment after entering the water, Duan Yun found Jade Guanyin's location. Seeing that she was about to escape back into the jade, he wouldn't give her such a chance. Just at this moment, his true qi was also exhausted, and it couldn't recover immediately. Jade Guanyin spit out a string of bubbles, realizing she might die now and, no longer caring about any techniques, kicked her legs like a shrew, trying to grab Duan Yun's hair. And Duan Yun, unable to muster true qi, resorted to punching her violently in the stomach, and then a knee strike followed. Both quickly entangled in a fight. It has to be said, at this moment, their fighting resembled a street brawl between a man and a shrew. If there was any difference, it was that both were without clothes, a situation of naked combat between a man and a woman not commonly seen in the martial world. Chapter 458. The two fought and tumbled in the water, eventually rolling onto the shore. Jade Guanyin briefly escaped Duan Yun, intending to run towards the town, because she still had her living dead in the town. She needed just a bit of true qi to command them. But then, with a loud bang, she was kicked flying out. Jade Guanyin, you're finished. Duan Yun, gasping for air, said with a righteous face. At this point, Jade Guanyin knew that struggling was utterly useless. She was truly incapable, without any strength left, feeling as if half her body was drained. Even someone who knew no martial arts could possibly kill her now. Not to mention old demon Duan, who was gradually regaining strength. She lay there, half of her skin soft and white as milk, the other half covered in bright blood. Please, this is my only wish before I die. Even though she was seriously wounded and missing much skin, she could still exude charm. Or rather, one half of her body, stained red with blood, was like a witch, even filled with a bloody allure. She believed she could seduce Duan Yun. There shouldn't be many men in the world who could refuse this request. And this was her only chance. Once they came together, she would have a chance to seize everything. At that moment, Duan Yun suddenly pressed his hand on her head with a sinister face. Rape you? You wish. Should a young hero's first time be given to you? Upon hearing this, Jade Guanyin thought, it's over. Indeed, under these circumstances, very few men could reject her. She even thought there were none. Even an eunuch, upon seeing her like this, would probably want a taste before taking her life. But she forgot that this man was a madman. He was a demon's minion. The next moment, Duan Yun's hand was already on her head, tightening, beaming divine skill. This mad woman had almost drained him. It was time to replenish, but he soon discovered that this woman's body was completely empty. Not even a little true qi. Useless. Then let this young hero see what sins you have committed. As his true qi began circulating the cycle, the suction in his palm grew stronger. Ah! Ah! Just when he increased his strength a bit, Jade Guanyin made that kind of sound. Even close to death, this mad woman was so enticing. For a moment, shattered memories surfaced in Duan Yun's sea of consciousness. And almost at the same time, both of them shivered. I want to be a hero, Jade Guanyin cried out in a seductive voice. Eh? Duan Yun suddenly froze, because he knew that when he shivered the most delightfully on someone's body, it was also when he was most in tune with the other's mind and could access their memories most efficiently. But at that moment, the other's memory fragments broke off. A piece of faint yellow jade emerged from Jade Guanyin's throat. Having said this, she breathed her last. A dead person, even if capable of saying, I want to be a hero, sadly couldn't offer any more memories. Jade Guanyin had many secrets. Just her cultivation technique alone was quite special and magical. What a pity, Duan Yun sighed. Actually, he was quite interested in learning this exploding clothes technique. Fighting with clothes exploding off, less cloth meant more vigor. It sounded exciting and particularly suited a young hero style. Yes, this martial art falling into the hands of a witch like Jade Guanyin was indiscreet, but only in the hands of a young hero like him could it be rectified and be most suitable. Now that Jade Guanyin was dead, the only thing left was to raid for her secret book. Finding the secret book and reforming it with extraordinary wisdom, even this demon Dao secret book could emit the light of the righteous path. No, he needed to save people first. Duan Yun sat there, feeling weak all over, slightly dizzy. Even now, he realized his own breathing sounded somewhat enticing. This mad woman's technique was truly unique, extremely flirtatious. If not for his resilient nature, his spirit might have been affected by this saucy energy. Duan Yun couldn't help but wonder, who was more flirtatious, Jade Guanyin or Murong brothers? For a moment, the image of the Murong brothers shaking their butts surfaced in his mind. One could only say one was flirtatious towards the opposite sex, and one towards the same sex, both epitomizing allure. Duan Yun rested for the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, glanced at Jade Guanyin's naked corpse to confirm there was no hidden treasure, then ignited a heroic fire lotus to set her body aflame. Jade Guanyin, the female demon who once seduced countless heavenly prides and beautiful men across the world, ultimately died. Died at the hands of the nameless young hero. The roaring flames illuminated his face, giving Duan Yun a great sense of accomplishment. The world had one less female demon who seduced others, and beauties like him gained more security. Although Duan Yun was very tired, he knew he couldn't stop, because he still had people to save and a house to raid. At that moment, a hurried footstep sound approached. He tensed up, thinking it was Jade Guanyin's disciples. But the next moment, he relaxed. It was Feng Linger. Feng Linger's feet were probably no more than 7 inches, about size 36. He could still tell as she approached. Sure enough, the next moment, Feng Linger appeared in his sight. Seeing him, she clutched her sword, nervously asking, "Where's Jade Guanyin?" Duan Yun pointed to the fire behind him and said, "Almost burnt out." At that time, Feng Linger finally dared to breathe a sigh of relief. The next moment, her eyes went blank, staring in shock, because Duan Yun was left with just a few pieces of cloth, virtually naked. Chapter 459. Or rather, this way of dressing is similar to a woman only wearing socks. Duan Yun also noticed her gaze and said, "Look, look, no charge for you." Feng Linger suddenly covered her eyes and exclaimed, "You pervert!" And yet, the gaps between her fingers widened too. However, at this moment, Duan Yun had already wrapped a piece of tree bark around himself, like wearing a skirt. By the time they left, the willow tree beside them had lost a ring of bark. "Where is Shening?" Duan Yun asked. "She's still there. Seems like she found some clues about Ning Qing and the others. She's worried about you and asked me to find you," Feng Linger said. It turned out that the battle in the attic not only demolished the attic but also the ground. And a space underground was revealed, which was probably the secret chamber of Jade Guanyin. Shening, worried that the collapsed rocks might hurt Ning Qing and the others, took the lead to check the situation. It was quite troublesome for Feng Linger to come out and find Duan Yun. She originally intended to follow the vein, but the vein quickly went underwater and branched out, leaving her clueless about which way to follow. Not until she saw a fire did she come over, and that fire was from the corpse of Jade Guanyin being ignited. With the death of Jade Guanyin, the Yuju duo relaxed a bit. It seemed that no one on Yellow Jade Island could stop them anymore. When Duan Yun and Feng Linger returned to the ruinous island, they indeed found a hole in the ground. The hole was pitch black, leading to an unknown destination. They jumped in and soon discovered the light ahead. Shening, where there's light, there's people. Duan Yun and Shun Ying hurriedly chased after it. After rushing through a long stone path, a cave appeared in their sight. The cave, with rocky pavilions and trickling streams, looked like a reclusive hermit's hideaway. At this moment, they also saw Xining. Xining was carrying two unconscious people on her shoulder, who were the long-missing Ning Qing and Ziyu. What happened to them? Duan Yun asked. Indeed, if something happened to Ning Qing, who knows what kind of extreme the Murong brothers would regrettably become. Xining shook her head and said, "They seem uninjured, but are unconscious." Seeing this, Feng Linger pinched their pulses and said, "They seem to be poisoned. We need to find the antidote quickly." Duan Yun said, "Is there any survivor nearby? Capture one and ask." Xining replied, "Actually, there is one." They quickly climbed back to the surface, Xining heading towards the ruin. There, under a stone pillar, a Guanyin person was trapped, gasping in pain. Duan Yun asked, "Where is the antidote for Jade Guanyin?" The Guanyin person looked very loyal and did not speak. Without any hesitation, Duan Yun placed his right hand on his head. A strange force of suction suddenly appeared in his palm, absorbing the other's true qi and simultaneously penetrating his mind to check his memories. "I want to be a hero." When the Guanyin person under the stone pillar, his face becoming indistinct from the absorption, cried out like this, a distance emerged in Duan Yun's sea of consciousness. This Guanyin person had not always looked like this. He was male, probably a scion of a noble family. Just like the others, he was captured by Jade Guanyin and brought to this island, violated by Jade Guanyin. Jade Guanyin brought him immense pleasure, making him utterly devoted, yet Jade Guanyin soon abandoned him. And the man, horrified, discovered he was transforming to look more and more like Guanyin, just like the Guanyin in the temples. Later, he found that there were quite a few others like him. It seemed that those violated by Jade Guanyin either turned into living dead or transformed into these Guanyin-like beings. And they all were hopelessly devoted to Jade Guanyin. After that, the man's memories abruptly ended. After reading these memories, Duan Yun felt a chill of fear. Before attempting to surprise attack Jade Guanyin, he hadn't considered sacrificing himself in the battle against demons, since Jade Guanyin was indeed enticing, and striking during those moments might have been easier. But he had scorned Jade Guanyin for being somewhat old, and worried that after having violated so many, could she be diseased? After all, Jade Guanyin's promiscuity was apparent, and she hardly seemed regular in her monthly cycles. So, he had made his move on the eve of her intended victory. Looking back now, his choice was indeed very wise. This matter of Jade Guanyin turning people into Guanyin persons, it seemed like some contagious disease. This chick really was toxic. Chapter 460. Evil skill? Yellow, 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 yellow intense skills. From the dying memory of this Guanyin person, Duan Yun vaguely learned a bit about the situation of the Jade Guanyin. The Jade Guanyin could enslave so many living dead because there were quite a few who looked strikingly similar to Guanyin statues, all because they had shared intimate pleasures with the Jade Guanyin. The Jade Guanyin was like a very peculiar contagious disease, a disease that could make people lose their divine sense, resembling walking corpses who only obeyed her orders, the living dead as referred to by the Jianghu people. And those who looked like Guanyin were more inclined to be variants of this disease. This was damn near like a gigantic biological mother body. Previously, Duan Yun thought aside from being older and lacking restraint, the Jade Guanyin was quite tempting, but now he only felt horror and uncleanliness. Fortunately, as a young hero, he had always been clean and self-disciplined, not entertaining the idea of pleasure before slaughter. If the Murong brothers had come, they might have been infected. Perhaps they would have fallen into misfortune. At this point, Duan Yun didn't even want to absorb this Guanyin person's true qi anymore. It just felt unclean. Even though he had gained some memories, the problem at hand remained unsolved. Ning Qing and Ziyu were both poisoned with a very strange poison. They didn't know how to cure this poison at the moment. At this time, a flash of inspiration struck Duan Yun's mind, and he said, "Right, why don't I just directly draw from them?" Yes, as long as he caused Ning Qing and Ziyu to shudder, he could also see their memories. If he knew how they were poisoned, at least he would have a clue. Duan Yun said action immediately followed words. He swiftly placed his hands on the heads of the two unconscious women. Upon seeing this, Feng Linger questioned, "They're out cold, will drawing still work?" She seriously suspected Duan Yun was taking advantage of the situation, seizing the opportunity to make Ning Qing and Ziyu shudder. Duan Yun replied, "As long as they're not dead, it'll work." After that, he focused on drawing. Duan Yun's manner of drawing from Ziyu and Ning Qing was much gentler, involuntarily displaying the demeanor of the medical practitioner's compassionate heart to such an extent that Feng Linger thought she had wronged him. She could even imagine the feeling since she had been made to shudder like that before. Back then, she was misdiagnosed by this perverted guy, and she had almost wanted to kill him, but thinking back on it now felt pleasantly comfortable. Will I be able to experience it again after a while? Nowadays, Duan Yun's Biming divine skill could be said to be refined to perfection, rough when he wanted it rough, gentle when he wanted it gentle. Moreover, this wasn't his first time drawing from Ning Qing. There was a sense of familiar routine. Previously, he had already drawn once to ensure she would not deceive the Murong brothers. This time, for the sake of the Murong brothers, he had no choice but to draw once more. Thus, when conducting the Biming divine skill simultaneously, Ning Qing was the first to react. As bits and pieces of memories began to float about, Duan Yun gradually increased his force. In the next instant, he and the unconscious Ning Qing started to shudder together. Seeing Ning Qing's toes curl up together, it was clear that the Biming divine skill was still effective. After that, Ning Qing's shuddering halted. Feng Linger and Shining, who were watching, couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Frankly speaking, this was even more immersive than when they were drawn from themselves. And before they could catch their breath, Ziyu started to have an intense shudder with Duan Yun on the other side. Following this shudder, Duan Yun's Biming divine skill suddenly peaked. Under the stronger drawing force, he and the two women started to shudder together. After the shuddering, Duan Yun let go, opened his eyes, and exhaled deeply, saying, "Got a clue now." In the memories of Ning Qing and Ziyu, he saw how they were poisoned and even how they were kidnapped. At that time, Ning Qing and Ziyu were happily carrying clothes they had purchased on their way back from small spring town. Suddenly, they saw a very beautiful woman. Given that they were both beautiful, one could say that apart from the Murong brothers who were unremarkable, Yuju Villa was full of beauties. But in that moment, they still thought this woman was very beautiful. Especially that kind of purity mixed with sultry charm, which made them feel inferior. And the moment they got close to that woman, they smelled a faint fragrance. Ziyu was the first to react, exclaiming, "Something's wrong." She hurriedly held her breath and focused, finding that the circulation of her true qi had become somewhat sluggish. Moon-shielding light-shaming sword. Instantly, her sister Green Jade woke up as well. The sword energy shone like a mirror, illuminating the newcomer, making them shy away while the sword was fierce. But only to see that woman flick her sleeve, and it rolled over like clouds. The mirror-like sword energy dimmed. Thud thud, Ziyu and Ning Qing felt something hard strike the back of their heads, and their vision became blurred. "Fancy tricks, he?" Before they fainted, they only heard such a seductive remark. They had to admit they were too weak. Even with the Jade Guanin's sneak attack, they lost too quickly. Especially Miss Ning, who was so concerned about the Murong brothers. Despite being an heir of the Mingyu Palace, she was naive and sweet. At least Ziyu had drawn her sword, but Ning Qing was utterly clueless, inhaling a large amount of poison fragrance without immediately using her true qi to defend herself. And without even lifting a hand, she was taken here. Afterward, naturally, they were half conscious, half awake, being led by the Jade Guanin to Yellow Jade Island. After they arrived at Yellow Jade Island, they were awake initially. The Jade Guanin would occasionally come to see them and tell them some circumstances. It was apparent that the mad woman mistook Ning Qing and Ziyu as her women, with words meant to make them green with envy. Little did she know that he and Ziyu misunderstood things more than flirtation, while Ning Qing fancied the Murong brothers.